Hello, romance lovers. Today's story is called I Became the Bloodthirsty Male Lead Mother. If you enjoy our videos, don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss out on more exciting stories. The woman asked if the girl was ready to return. Then she said that the bet was accepted. A few minutes later, the girl opened her eyes and heard a noise. She did not understand where she was and believed that she was dead. The maid spoke happily, saying that everyone was happy to see the mistress conscious, but the girl only asked what had happened. She had absolutely no idea what was going on, who this girl was, or why they were calling her mistress. Unknown memories were arising in her head, and a strange feeling told her that she needed to rest. But the maid persistently tried to wake her up and got an answer. At that moment, a gentleman entered the room, but he was immediately told that he should not come without warning. The maid tried to explain that the lady's condition was critical. The gentleman noted that he expected her to scream and try to throw objects at him as soon as she saw him. The main character looked at this man with horror. He seemed to her like a giant, so big that it was frightening. The maid told the master that his wife had had an accident and that she needed time to recover. The gentleman merely chuckled, saying that she always behaved like that, and then added that my lady seemed to be pretending to be in love again. The girl was stunned when she realized that this man was her husband. Meanwhile, he continued to say that he should have restrained himself, but now he would not appear in the mansion for some time. At that moment, she realized that she was definitely dead. But for some reason, she now has a husband with whom they clearly do not get along. She was overcome with despair. Something was clearly wrong. The maid tried to convince her mistress that she needed peace. Another servant noticed that the lady had recently been injured, so it was too early for her to get up. But the main character did not listen. The memories of another person continued to pop up in her head. She had silver hair that fell like golden silk to her waist and bright, expressive eyes. And suddenly she remembered her name, Sharia Loparam. She was the most beautiful lady of the empire, the famous Duchess of Loparam, a mother who neglects her son, the young protagonist of the novel Torn Wings. It seemed impossible, but it seemed like she had become a character from a book she had once read. However, she tried to calm down, no matter how incredible it sounded. But she didn't understand how this happened, because this girl is hardly mentioned in the plot. She actually played the role of the main character's mother and is currently not sleeping, possibly because of the pain. If all this is true, then she will have to live here. Suddenly it occurred to her that she would actually have to stay here. She didn't understand why she became the mother of the main character and not a secondary character. Her son was completely insane. He killed people more than once. He could even kill her if she interfered with him even a little. She remembered several scenes with him from the original work. He told one girl that if she wanted to leave, she could do as she wished, because he was generous. However, if he catches her, she must be prepared for the consequences. Her legs will be chained in iron so that she will never escape again. The protagonist of such novels usually becomes that way because of his upbringing, especially if he has cruel parents. In such cases, he gets rid of everyone who irritates him. This means that he definitely had a bad father, and therefore his mother was not the best either. The girl started to get hysterical. At first, she thought that she just had a bad relationship with her husband, but now it turned out that her son was a psychopath obsessed with the main character. If she wants to survive, she needs to mend her family relationships before it's too late. But who is better to start with? The problematic husband or the son she hasn't remembered for years? In the morning, she heard someone outside and she became curious about who it was. She looked out and saw a boy. He was very cute. And then she thought, if this boy appeared in her memories, it means she knows who he is. This charming child is her future psychopathic son. She had never seen such cute young protagonists, so she couldn't help but admire them. This world seemed strange to her, because in the novel it was completely different. She decided that it was better to deal with a cute child than with a frightening husband. After all, the boy looked so nice, but she still had to think about where to start. The next day, the maid told her mistress that breakfast was ready and it was time to get up. She suggested that the lady was feeling better, and the girl confirmed this. The maid noted that for some time the mistress should not worry about the affairs in the mansion. It would be better to recover. After this, the lady turned to Margot and asked how many days she was unconscious after what happened. The maid reported that this had been going on for several days, and the mistress noticed that, despite this, she did not feel rested and was recovering slowly. The maid said that the case was serious, and there was nothing surprising in that. Everyone thought that she was seriously injured. They were beside themselves with worry. Who would have thought that the carriage would get into an accident? The lady nodded, saying that she understood. After all, her husband had visited her, despite their strained relationship. She had not heard anything about her son, so she turned to the maid, asking if Cardisel was busy now. The maid was embarrassed but confirmed. As expected, everything turned out to be worse than the mistress had assumed. But she wasn't going to sit idle, so she immediately asked where her son was now. The maid reported that the young master was now in the garden, and it seemed that the lady was going to meet him. In the novel, Cardisel was completely incapable of understanding the feelings of others, but now he was much younger. She definitely should have made the first move. Even though she was scared, she shouldn't have postponed the meeting. That way they would understand faster how damaged their relationship was, but it will take a long time to restore them. The maid apologized for saying something stupid. Then she wished the lady a pleasant rest. But the lady got out of bed and asked her to stop. She said she wanted to see something and asked the maid to take her to the garden. The maid noted that this was not possible, since the mistress had not yet fully recovered. The lady smiled and assured that everything would be fine, adding that she hoped for her help. The maid replied that of course she agreed and would immediately begin preparations. Before meeting Cardisel, the garden looked amazingly beautiful. In the novel, it was covered with thorny vines to prevent the heroine from escaping. She wanted to ask again where exactly Cardisel was now, but suddenly she noticed him herself. She was delighted to see the boy. He was so cute that her heart involuntarily sank. He sat at the table and ate something with obvious pleasure. He seemed to like it, but I doubt there's anyone who doesn't like sweets. In the novel, Sheriel somehow completely forgot about such a lovely child, and the boy himself, noticing his mother, looked puzzled. He had a very sweet face. He looked exactly like he did in the novel. She really wanted to go up to him and wipe his face. It was all covered in cream. But suddenly the boy turned in her direction, hearing a rustling in the bushes. Sheriel told Margot that it looked like they had been discovered. The boy loudly declared that he could hear them, and then the lady came out to him. She greeted him, and he immediately asked what she was doing there. She said she was just taking a stroll in the garden and asked if he would mind if his mother joined him for tea. The guy was silent at first. Then he sighed and started to leave. The lady didn't quite understand what was going on and where he was going. She was upset because it looked like he was going to run away from her, but she couldn't let that happen. She grabbed him by the sleeve and asked him to wait. She looked at the boy, hoping that he would spare her at least a minute. He looked at her strangely but said nothing. Finally, he said that it was not so, pushed her away and added sharply that he did not need a mother. The lady was shocked. She couldn't even imagine that she was so unsuitable for him. When he started to run, she tried to stop him, calling out, but he didn't turn around. Suddenly, the boy caught on a rock and fell. She immediately rushed to him, but he shouted at her to go away and not pretend to be kind. He said that he knew the truth, but the lady asked him to wait. He had a scratch on his knee and his mother would help. He started shouting, demanding that she move away. After all, she herself said that she didn't need him. He stood up with difficulty, in tears, but left anyway. The servants immediately ran up to him, worried, and warned him that it was dangerous to run like that. The lady was shocked and did not understand what to do next. In the evening, she looked out the window and her heart was sad. It looked like her son had been hurt badly and she didn't know if he would be okay. Besides, he seemed to hate her a lot more than she thought. And that was a serious problem. He probably wouldn't be back in the garden tomorrow. She felt like she had deprived her son of his only place to rest. Cardisel must have been very surprised by such an unexpected change in his mother. She needed to figure out how to get closer to him, but not as abruptly as she tried today. She asked Margot if she was there. The maid confirmed, and the mistress asked to deliver the letter to her son. Margot was surprised and asked again, but the lady insisted. Although it was late, the letter still had to reach him. She sincerely wants to improve her relationship with Cardisel. The maid was delighted and assured her that her mistress could rely on her. She promised that the letter would be delivered safe and sound. In the morning, the boy woke up and saw the gift again. He couldn't understand why she kept sending him all this unnecessary junk. Today, there was a teddy bear in the box. There was also a letter in which his mother asked how he slept. She noted that the weather was nice today, ordered his favorite desserts to be prepared, and wrote that he could rest peacefully in the garden. She would not disturb him. She also asked about his knee. He remembered telling her that she irritated him, and now he didn't understand why she kept sending him such letters. The servant was surprised to see that the young master had already woken up. Cardisel shuddered, trying to hide his excitement, and began to hide the letter so that no one would notice it. He threw away all the gifts, but left the letters, and the servant noticed this perfectly. The butler, hearing the door creak, thought that the gentleman would wake up again and assumed that he needed help changing his clothes. But the boy replied that he could handle it himself. Then the servant asked what to do with the teddy bear. Cardisel was silent at first, concentrating on sorting through his clothes. Only a minute later, he said that he could throw the toy away again, but so that the lady would not see it. However, at the last moment, the boy changed his mind, stopped him, and asked him to wait. He told him to throw out only the box and leave the bear in the room. The servant smiled and remarked that the young master seemed to really like the gift. But Cardisel quickly objected, saying that it was not the mother's fault at all. He simply liked the toy. The butler nodded and assured that he would only throw away the box. Then the boy suddenly hesitated and asked the servant to stay, as he wanted to ask for something. Cherielle was delighted to see that her son had sent her a reply. She immediately called Margot. The maid, noticing her mistress's joy, also rejoiced and congratulated her on the letter. Everyone was curious about what he had written. Cherielle unfolded the paper and was surprised by the contents. The letter said only one thing: no more gifts or messages. As expected, she seemed to have jumped the gun. Margot was upset, but tried not to show it. The lady sighed and said that everything was fine. She did not expect quick success. Moreover, she emphasized, it was written beautifully, and this proved that her son was very smart. Margot agreed, noting that the letter was indeed neat and that the young gentleman was a quick learner. Despite everything, Cherielle was happy. After all, this was the first time her son had written to her himself. The maid assumed that Cardisel simply didn't know her well enough yet. After all, the mistress hadn't shown any interest in him before. It might have been untimely, but she was still glad to see Cherielle smile, since she had looked distant since her arrival. The heroine thought, does that mean she never smiled before? Does that mean she never even laughed in the Duke's house? Remembering those around her, she realized that their faces were also always gloomy. They seemed to be concerned not with her condition, but with what she might do to them. It made her feel strangely sad. It was as if she were looking at her former self from the outside. Surprisingly, she had no memories of her life in the duchy. Perhaps I should have asked Margot about this. The maid noticed her mistress's gaze and looked at her in bewilderment, but Cherielle decided there was no need to rush. First, she needed to focus on her son. She sighed and wondered if Cardisel would stop hating her if she became closer to him. Margot answered confidently that yes. Perhaps it was worth trying to meet him in person. However, the lady doubted. What if he gets hurt again like last time? Besides, they didn't even know where he was now. But the maid just looked at her in surprise. After all the maids knew that recently the young master had been going to the garden a little earlier than usual. Margot thought that the mistress had noticed it too. Cherielle was shocked. But then she remembered that she had promised not to disturb her son in the garden anymore. The maid remarked that she was sure that the young master also wanted to see the lady. She promised to help her get ready, so they had to go quickly. They got ready and left. Cherielle acted like she had no choice, but in her heart she was still unsure if she should do it. She thought about what to say when they met. Walking a little forward, she saw her son sitting on a bench. Cardisel was indeed there, and he noticed her too. She came closer and asked how his wound was. The boy waved his hand dismissively, saying that she was fine. As Cherielle came closer, she noticed that he had treated the wound. This made her very happy. He had been sitting in the garden for a long time, but still hadn't touched the desserts. She wondered if he was expecting something. So she decided to ask again. The boy was silent at first, then embarrassedly said that he had not been expecting her at all. Cherielle noted that she was sure he thought she wouldn't come today. Cardisel replied that he was here almost always and saw no point in leaving just because someone came here. Does this mean that she can come to him? But the boy immediately denied it. He was still cautious, but he didn't leave. Cherielle felt relieved. She asked again if she could just look. The boy, embarrassed, stared at his plate. His silence was a sign of consent, and the lady was pleased. She thanked him and promised not to interfere. Now he had finally started eating, and Cherielle thought that perhaps he trusted her at least a little. They say that children are good at sensing people. Today, Cardisel seemed especially sweet. A week later, the lady thought she practically did not participate in social life, but invitations still came without end. She invariably responded to them with a polite refusal. There was no need for social events now. She had no time for them, and they irritated her in general. It was much more pleasant to simply watch her son in the garden. One more answer and the invitations will finally be over. The maid remarked that the mistress had done a good job, and then cautiously asked if she could ask a question. If the mistress did not mind. Cherielle nodded, and Margot noticed that she had been making an obvious effort to get closer to the young master lately. Cherielle replied that she seemed to be doing well, but the maid noted that there were some entries in her diary, including observational records of those who hate her. The mistress did not understand why the maid thought so. She simply wrote down everything that seemed nice to her in Cardisel. Be that as it may, the maid believed that the mistress should only respond to truly important invitations. Sheriel wondered what she should write in her diary today. When they met, she always wrote down everything that she found touching. For her, this was completely normal. In her diary, she noted that Cardisel was silent when she came, and that it was very sweet. She also wrote that the boy ignored her when she tried to talk, which she also found charming. And today he even nodded when she greeted him. He rejected all her gifts, but according to the maids, he liked the teddy bear. Moreover, he even answered her letters, and it was incredibly sweet. Margot noticed that her mistress was literally glowing with happiness. Then the maid remarked with a smile, since she was writing so much about how sweet the young gentleman was, perhaps she should show these notes to Cardisel himself. She didn't expect the lady to agree, but suddenly Sheriel really thought about it. She asked again if Margot was sure that this was a good idea and whether it could help them get closer. The maid was in complete shock. The mistress not only agreed, but was fired up by the idea. She thought this was a great opportunity to chat with the young master. Sheriel was clearly out of her mind, but she thought it was a great plan. She thanked Margot warmly and promised that she would return soon. Now she was unbearably tormented by curiosity. What did the young master's room look like? She's never been there, but he's still a kid, so it should all look really cute. I wonder what color his walls are. There may be lots of toys there, and it must certainly be charming. It was scary to even knock, but gathering her courage, she knocked anyway. I tried to calm myself down and breathed evenly. She knocked again and suddenly heard the voice of a boy asking who was there. She was scared because he answered so quickly. After this, the boy opened the door and noted that he had asked who was there. The lady sat down next to him and greeted him. He immediately started to run away, but Sheriel stopped him, saying that she had come to show him something important. The boy looked out from behind the door and looked at her carefully. She was embarrassed. He looked incredibly cute. He reluctantly let her in, noting that he was in a good mood today because of the chocolate he had eaten. This was not what she expected at all. The room turned out to be dark and gloomy, but she noticed that the teddy bear she had given him was lying next to him, and that made her happy. The boy immediately grabbed the toy and began to hide it, muttering that he simply didn't want to throw it away. Then he crossed his arms over his chest and asked what exactly she wanted to show him. The lady carefully handed him the diary, explaining that she had written it personally and offered to read it. The boy took the diary, frowned with displeasure, but began to read anyway. His face slowly lengthened, and then he exclaimed, "What is this?" He was so angry that he even wanted to burn the diary. At this moment, Duke Loperum's special skill, Wings of Darkness, appeared. The family book said that only the one who inherited this gift could become the heir. Cardisel owned him, and the lady was genuinely happy. Her son was truly special. But she felt sorry for the diary because now it was burning in his hands. The boy lowered his head and muttered that he didn't want to do it. But Sheriel reassured him, saying that it was okay. If he didn't like it, she wouldn't keep a diary anymore. But the boy suddenly asked why she called him that. The lady did not immediately understand what he was talking about, and he, without raising his eyes, quietly said that she had called him not Cardisel, but Cardi. She thought about it, wondering if perhaps he didn't like the abbreviation. But the boy didn't look angry, he just quietly repeated the name. Then the lady asked if he wanted her to call him that. She smiled. How could this innocent child become a tyrant in the future? She doesn't want him to hurt others, to hurt the Duchess. If he is loved, he will learn to love himself, and then in the future he will become different. Therefore, from now on, she will become a real mother for him. The boy nodded and said he agreed. Then Sheriel asked again if he could devote at least 10 minutes a day to his mother. He was confused and did not understand why this was necessary. Then she gently apologized for talking about it so late, but she wanted to teach him something important. How to treat people with respect, how to love and care for others. After all, no one had ever explained such things to him before. After a short silence, the boy reluctantly agreed, clarifying that he was only willing to devote 10 minutes. Sheriel smiled, thanked him, and promised that she would not disappoint. An incredibly wonderful child. She didn't understand how he turned into a tyrant, depriving others of freedom, and all because no one cared about him. So he didn't know what it meant to be loved and to love. If you raise Cardisel correctly, he won't grow up like he did in the original story. The boy narrowed his eyes and asked what she was up to, because she looked worried. The lady replied thoughtfully that she was trying to decide where to start. She asked him what he would do if he caught a beautiful bird. The boy answered without hesitation that he would first build a secure cage for her. The lady smiled and said that it was wonderful that he wanted to give the bird a home. But the boy immediately added that if he liked the bird, he would close it so that it could never fly away. Hearing this, the lady was horrified and did not know how to react. She tried to explain that if she was locked up, she would try to escape at the first opportunity. Whatever one may say, something in him from childhood hinted at his future character. The boy noticed her confusion and asked why his mother was silent. The lady smiled tensely and said she was simply surprised at how deeply he thought. Then she suggested that they read a book together next time, and the boy reluctantly agreed. The lady couldn't understand where she had made a mistake. Was he really like this from the very beginning? She felt that the situation was much more complicated than it seemed, and now she did not know how to properly raise this child. Suddenly, a maid burst into the room, and the mistress reproachfully told her not to frighten her so much. Margot justified herself by saying that she had called her several times, but she had not answered, and so she decided that something was bothering the lady. After all, she had a sad expression on her face. The lady immediately remembered that incident with her son when he burned her diary. It's a little sad to remember, but Margot is better off not knowing about it. The maid assumed that the mistress was worried about the Duke's imminent return. Sheriel was surprised and asked again, meaning the tall, handsome man she met on the day of her rebirth. It was her husband and Cardisel's father. Both parents have to raise a child, so maybe this was a chance to bond with him in a natural way. Of course, the Duke still frightened her, but now the lady was thinking only about how to improve the relationship between her sweet son and his father. She turned to Margot and asked when exactly the Duke would return. The maid replied that unless there were any force majeure circumstances, then in 2 days, and then added that her next question might sound rude. She was curious if the lady was going to hide when the master returned. The lady looked at her in surprise, not understanding what she was getting at. Margot noticed that the mistress had been thinking a lot about the young master lately. Thanks to this, the mansion seemed to come alive, and the maid was sincerely grateful for this. She decided to ask the mistress for a favor, but she herself did not understand where she got so much courage from. Sheriel was only surprised, looking at the maid full of enthusiasm. Margot admitted that she had no right to ask for such a thing, but she still said, "When the gentleman returns, let the lady greet him at least once, just for the sake of decency." Sheriel was taken aback by her words. It was unexpected, because she hadn't even thought about such a thing, not considering that it could be something important for those around her. She tried not to think about it because she hadn't even realized how cold her relationship with her husband had been before. She didn't think it was necessary to change anything. Margot realized that she had perhaps spoken too harshly. The last few days had been so joyful that she wanted to express her thoughts, but perhaps she had overdone it. She decided not to hide her feelings when she was near her mistress. But if there was a punishment for this, then so be it. Her words were spoken sincerely, without evil intent. Sheriel didn't immediately understand what this was all about. Of course, she would agree to greet her husband when he returned. There was nothing complicated or special about it. Margot knew she had gone too far, but she still listened carefully to her mistress's words. She did not want to seem impudent, but she spoke only with good intentions. Family discord is always a difficult test for a child. So Sheriel simply looked at the maid and asked why she was still standing there, not leaving. Margot quickly realized that she needed to warn all the servants about her mistress's decision. If Sheriel really was going to greet the Duke, it was important for the servants to know in advance. She will not allow her sweet little boy, her son, to turn into a bloody tyrant. She will do everything in her power to prevent this from happening, despite her past mistakes. Margot couldn't hide her delight. It seemed to her that there was a completely different person in front of her. She didn't believe that her mistress had really made such a decision that was unexpected for everyone. The maid did not hesitate. She rushed to tell this news to all the servants, barely containing her excitement. Such an event could not go unnoticed in the mansion. Sheriel decided that since the servants were preparing for the Duke's arrival, she should also finish her business. Paperwork does not wait. An order in the documents is no less important than anything else. She was about to begin, but suddenly stopped. A strange thought came to her mind. She didn't even know her husband's name. This fact confused her a little. Meanwhile, on the road, one of the servants cautiously approached the master. He asked if everything was all right, noticing that he did not look his best. The Duke slowly turned his head in his direction. There was not a drop of joy in his eyes. He answered briefly that he did not want to go back at all, but he had no choice. The man was sure that all his worries were connected with the mistress. This thought did not give him peace, but he did not know what exactly was troubling him so much in this sudden return. However, he quickly realized that such questions could get him into trouble. So he quickly apologized, deciding that there was no point in delving deeper into his thoughts. The Duke was tired of all this fuss. He had had enough of worrying. They were almost there. and he thought it pointless to waste time on conversations that were leading nowhere. He knew he would have to knock on doors again, but it was unlikely that the lady would be in the mansion. She had never met him, and he saw no reason why things would change now. But when the carriage stopped, suddenly all the servants appeared in front of him. They were standing at the entrance as if they had been waiting for his return for a long time, which was completely unusual. He couldn't understand what was going on. Why were the servants all outside? This had never happened before. Usually no one came out to greet him except the butler. But the strangest thing was not even that. The Duke was stunned when he saw that his wife was among the people standing in front of him. This was the last thing he expected. Sheriel took a few steps forward, approaching him. He couldn't hide his surprise as he watched her. She looked different than he remembered. The woman smiled slightly and said calmly that she had been waiting for him. Her voice sounded so natural, as if she had really been planning to meet him from the very beginning. The Duke was so stunned that he even glanced at his assistant. It all seemed strange, and he began to doubt the reality of what was happening. He confidently stated that he was probably just delirious. It would be better to call the doctors as soon as they were inside, because he could not explain what was happening otherwise. But the knight only replied that the real lady really stood before him. However, the Duke still continued to believe that this was just a game of his mind. The lady did not understand what was wrong with the Dukes and noticed that there was a rather cold wind today, so she suggested that they return home as soon as possible. The Duke looked at his wife with distrust. He was curious about what she had planned this time. She had never shown any interest in him before, and now she was meeting him in person. Sheriel wasn't quite sure why he was looking at her like that. She assumed he must be very tired after the journey, and remarked that he would do well to rest. She suggested that they not linger outside and go inside. Besides, standing outside for a long time would hardly do him any good. After all, she was waiting for him. He couldn't quite comprehend that it was his wife standing in front of him. The last time he saw her, she had been in an accident. Perhaps she had memory problems. Sheriel looked at him as if waiting for an answer, and then ordered the servants to prepare his favorite dishes. He was probably hungry after the journey and wanted to eat. In addition, she reminded Margot of the request she had made earlier. Important things were best kept under control, especially when the house was full of servants and guests. When there was no one left around, Sheriel quietly asked Margot to leave them so they could talk alone, without prying ears. She looked around and noticed that the mansion was bustling. Everyone was busy preparing, cleaning the rooms, setting the table. It looked unusual. The Duke couldn't help but notice that Sheriel was smiling. It surprised him, because she had never behaved like that in his presence before. Something had changed. He placed his hand lightly on her shoulder, trying to catch her reaction. She flinched but did not pull away. Then he asked what she wanted from him. Sheriel calmly pointed out that they should eat first. After all, that was what they were heading to the dining hall for. The Duke knew that her words sounded logical, but deep down he couldn't believe that this was actually happening. He looked at his wife carefully, as if trying to unravel her secret. However, nothing unusual would likely happen in the dining room. Sheriel confirmed his guess and added that she simply thought that perhaps he would not want to wait long for the servants to finish their preparations. Sheriel decided not to delay this moment and suggested to hurry. There was no more time to think, and she was not going to put off the conversation for later. The Duke was momentarily taken aback by her unexpected directness. He was not used to seeing her like this, and she, ignoring his confusion, calmly stated that she wanted to talk. Hearing this, the Duke immediately became wary. He was sure that there was something more hidden behind this. The thought that she was planning something strange again flashed through his mind. Sheriel never made idle conversation without a reason. She always communicated only when it brought her some benefit. So his suspicions only grew stronger. Besides, he knew his wife hated him. He couldn't shake the feeling that something strange was about to happen. Like she was going to say something unexpected and then die. But you can't just ignore a woman who has been preparing for this meeting since the morning. He still decided to be patient and at least listen to her until the end. Sheriel knew that if she didn't pull herself together now, the moment would be lost, and there might not be a second chance, so she needed to say it right now. She had a hard time starting a conversation. She knew she had to set the stage first to get the conversation going, otherwise he would cut her off right away. The Duke noticed her hesitation, but still asked what exactly she wanted to say. He was clearly losing his patience, but he tried to maintain his composure. He asked her impatiently not to drag it out and just tell her everything at once. He didn't like being kept waiting, especially when it came to Sheriel. She thoughtfully noted that she was wondering if he had had a hard time at work and how the journey had gone. After all, it had been a long journey and he might have had a hard time. The Duke immediately became wary. Sheriel didn't usually talk like that. He immediately realized that something was wrong and began to suspect that she was up to something. The Duke thought about it, but eventually decided that perhaps she was just trying to show that she cared. Although he found it hard to believe that she was genuinely concerned about him, he slowly put his fork aside, looked at her carefully, and asked if she was really worried or if this was just another game on her part. He then dryly remarked that she would probably be much happier if he never returned, or at least got injured while staying somewhere longer. Sheriel flushed at his words. She couldn't let him think that way, and immediately, with indignation in her voice, she declared that she had never wished anything like that on him. The Duke quietly noted that there was something odd about her behavior. She was doing things she had never done before and trying to hold herself too straight, as if she had prepared for this conversation in advance. But she had expected such a reaction and was prepared for resistance. So, having collected her thoughts, she tried not to lose her composure and to continue what she had planned. She stated firmly that they had a son, but the Duke seemed not to understand what she was getting at. He frowned slightly, waiting to see where exactly this conversation would lead. Then Sheriel clarified that she wanted to talk about Cardisel, namely about his upbringing. They both had to pay more attention to him, otherwise it would affect the child. The Duke stood up slowly, sighing heavily. He was tired of this conversation, which, in his opinion, was started not because of the child, but for some other reason. He reminded her that just recently she had openly declared that she hated him. So why had she now suddenly decided that they should raise their son together? She had indeed acted differently after the accident, but he still couldn't believe that it was the same Sheriel in front of him. However, she assured him that she was fine. She insisted that they just discuss the matter calmly. After all, it was really important, and there was no point in putting it off any longer. But the Duke only shook his head, noting that it would be better if she did not approach him. He still did not trust her, and her sudden behavior seemed suspicious to him. The Duke looked at her with a cold squint and asked if she really thought he would believe her pretended concern. It all seemed too fake. Sheriel sighed nervously and said with concern in her voice that she didn't understand what he was talking about. She wasn't pretending or trying to deceive him. It was all true. She tried to do everything possible for Cardisel, but no matter how hard she tried, her efforts seemed insufficient. She could not achieve the desired result. She had hoped to resolve the matter calmly by simply talking, but for some reason the Duke was angry. She did not understand why he did not want to at least listen to her. It hurts her, but she won't let her son be a secondary player in her own life. She's willing to do everything in her power for him. The Duke sighed wearily and coldly remarked that if she had nothing more to say, he would simply leave, since this conversation had no meaning for him. Sheriel didn't have time to finish what she wanted to say. So, realizing that he was leaving, she tried to stop him and asked him to listen to her until the end. In a hurry, she rushed after him, but miscalculated her steps and suddenly stumbled, unable to keep her balance, and began to fall forward. The Duke, hearing a noise behind him, turned sharply and before she hit the floor, managed to catch her, preventing her from falling. Sheriel quietly said that she understood how much she irritated him. But despite this, for the sake of their son, she still wanted to come to an agreement with him. She did everything she could, but she couldn't fight anymore. Her body weakened and she lost consciousness, going limp in his arms. The Duke, alarmed by her condition, loudly ordered the servants to immediately call a doctor. The maids, realizing the seriousness of the situation, immediately ran. Sheriel didn't have time to say everything she wanted to. She was pierced not only by mental but also physical pain, because of which she couldn't even utter a word. The Duke gently lowered her onto the bed, still wondering what could have caused her to faint. He looked at her carefully, trying to understand what had happened to her. Sheriel, gradually coming to her senses, did not understand why he asked such a question. She just wanted to have a normal conversation. But in response, he received rudeness, which made her feel even worse. If such an angry look is directed at a person during dinner and in complete silence, it is not surprising that someone might lose consciousness, unable to withstand the tension. Even if she is not a real wife to him, it is difficult to bear the constant conflict. When there is a person radiating malice nearby, it is simply impossible to resist. And he is not even cute, like her son. Sheriel, looking up with difficulty, asked him if he really felt such hatred towards her, because it seemed like so many years had passed. But he was still just as angry. The Duke merely coldly remarked that, in his opinion, the hatred between them was mutual, since she had shown her attitude towards him more than once. Her surprise seemed insincere, but Sheriel looked genuinely confused. She couldn't understand where he got such thoughts from. Why did he think she hated him? Why did she treat her like that? The Duke reminded him that as soon as he got a little closer to her, she began to scream, fight back, and even throw pillows, as if he posed a threat to her. And now she was sitting in front of him and acting like she didn't remember anything, pretending like nothing had happened. It looked strange and made him suspicious. When he touched her hand, she gave a sharp cry. The Duke frowned because he did not squeeze her very hard, and her reaction was too sharp, as if something hurt her. The Duke misjudged his strength when he touched her hand, and only now did he realize that he had hurt her. He noticed that her skin was cold, which for some reason alarmed him. He realized that her hands were so icy, as if she had been shivering from the cold for a long time. So despite her possible displeasure, he decided to try to warm them up. Even if she was uncomfortable, he still insisted that she endure a little while he warmed her palms. She shouldn't stay in this state because the doctor hadn't arrived yet. Sheriel said nothing, just looked at him with interest. She hadn't expected such concern, and it made her feel strangely perplexed. But she didn't argue with him. The Duke simply remarked calmly that the most important thing now was patience. The doctor would be here soon, and then it would be clear what was wrong with her. For now, she should just rest. Soon the doctor ran into the room, followed by the maids. They immediately began to question the lady about her health, and the doctor began his examination without losing a second. The Duke did not linger. He was about to leave and, casting a last glance at his wife, told her to simply rest and not make any sudden movements until the weakness passed. However, Sheriel, despite her weakness, tried to stop him. Meanwhile, the doctor warned her that she should not overexert herself, otherwise her condition could worsen. But that wasn't what upset her. They didn't even have time to talk normally. She wanted to discuss something important, but everything was cut off again, as if he didn't care about her words at all. The men in this house seemed unbearable to her. They even refused the delicacies prepared with love. How could she live with them if they were so cold? The next day, when she woke up, she still felt unwell. Her head was spinning, her body felt weak, but the thought she had fallen asleep with would not leave her. She wanted her son to grow up in a happy family, so that he would not feel tension between his parents, so that he would know that he was loved. But how could she achieve this? Sheriel didn't understand how she could get close to her husband when he avoided talking. Their relationship was like a crack that was getting deeper with each passing day. Sheriel didn't even want to try to change anything again, because any of her attempts only crashed against the wall of indifference. She didn't know what to do now and where to go next. Suddenly, she heard someone's footsteps, and this surprised her. After all, she had specifically asked Margot not to let anyone in. Whoever it was, he clearly entered the room without the maid's permission. If Margot couldn't stop the visitor, it was either her husband or Cardisel. The servants wouldn't dare disobey her orders for anyone else. The thought that it could be her son instantly lifted her spirits. She even sat up in bed, hoping that she would see him in front of her now. Sheriel couldn't help but ask again if it was really Cardisel who had come to see her. She hoped to hear his voice, which could dispel her worries. At that moment, the door actually opened and her son appeared on the threshold. In one hand, he held his favorite toy, and with the other, he waved at her, confirming that it was really him. As soon as she saw him, Sheriel felt her soul lighten. This was her dear son, her treasure, and she was simply happy to see him here. Cardisel reported that he had heard from one of the maids that his mother had fainted. This news alarmed him, and he immediately decided to visit her. He couldn't sit quietly in his room knowing that his mother was unwell. So he came here himself without waiting for permission, because it was important for him to make sure that she was okay. The boy was so caring that Sheriel could not contain her tenderness. Her heart sank with overwhelming feelings, and she was grateful to fate for such a son. Cardisel handed her his teddy bear, assuring her that when someone was sick, they should definitely eat well and have something warm nearby to feel better. Sheriel couldn't hide her joy. She warmly thanked her son for his care, realizing how sensitive and kind he was. He was the most precious person to her. Cardisel was very embarrassed. His face turned red, and he quickly explained that he had not come to see his mother for this reason. He wanted her to know that his visit was not connected with anything unusual. He continued that the maid had conveyed the request to him, and that was the only reason he had come. He hoped that his words would clear up any misunderstandings that might have arisen. Sheriel, despite her son's embarrassment, was grateful for his attention. She was genuinely happy for his visit, even though the boy might have felt a little uncomfortable. But Sheriel couldn't understand why Cardisel was looking at her like that. She hadn't done anything to make him angry or feel strange, and that puzzled her a little. Sheriel tried to figure out what made him look at her like that. She honestly didn't understand what she had done wrong that he could react so strangely and incomprehensibly. Cardisel, in turn, felt embarrassed and awkward. He did not expect his mother to thank him so warmly, and this caused him some confusion. He was not prepared for such a reaction. The boy was quick to point out that she shouldn't touch him like that next time. It wasn't something he was used to, and he felt uncomfortable with the way his mother petted him. Sheriel immediately apologized, promising that next time she would try to be more restrained and not do anything that might embarrass her son. She didn't want to worry him, but Cardisel, with concern in his voice, added that if she was so tired that she fainted, she should not eat at the same table with her father. This worried him greatly. He expressed his concern, and this became the reason for his anger. He did not want his mother to suffer, and his feelings about this were quite sincere, although a little harsh. Sheriel still couldn't understand how Cardisel could be so honest and so sweet at the same time. He was so simple in his feelings that it amazed her even more than his words. Sheriel noticed that her son didn't seem to understand her behavior, and she was trying to get used to the situation. She hoped that with time, everything would get better, and that this would not happen again. Cardisel asked in surprise if she was really trying so hard to make everything go well. She confirmed his words, explaining that all this was happening because he was her husband and his father. Sheriel added that she also doesn't want to be around someone so scary, but she does all this for the sake of her son's happiness and well-being, so that he feels good and comfortable. The boy, unable to contain his emotions, asked if he was really more important than everyone else. He wanted to understand to what extent his mother was ready to make him a priority in her life, and whether he would always come first. Sheriel firmly replied that there was nothing more important than her son. However, Cardisel, not agreeing with this, shouted that now she would spend time with her father, forgetting about him. He felt neglected and thoughtfully suggested that they would also dine with him now, without her participation. It hurt him that his mother no longer devoted so much time to him. After these words, he could not bear it any longer and began to run away, trying to hide from everything that was troubling him. Sheriel, not understanding what was happening, watched his actions in confusion. Sheriel realized that Cardisel felt as if he was forgotten and abandoned. He felt as if she no longer paid attention to him, which was the cause of his sadness and anger. Sheriel hurried to run up to her son from behind and hugged him, trying to calm him down and make him understand that there was no one more important to her than Cardisel. She would always be there, no matter what. Cardisel asked again if she really thought so, and Sheriel confirmed that there was nothing more important to her than the time spent with him. She was ready to give everything to be near him. The boy, hearing her words, became very embarrassed and looked down. It was hard for him to believe her sincerity, and he said reservedly that he did not expect such words from her, although he felt grateful. Sheriel didn't quite understand his reaction, and noticed that his voice sounded without much emotion. She assumed that his indifference was due to recent events and his feelings that had not yet subsided. She began to realize that despite everything, he still felt a certain distance from her and did not trust her completely. This was becoming more and more obvious, and it was upsetting her a little. Suddenly, to Sheriel's surprise, Cardisel turned to her and hugged her, which shocked her greatly. She had not expected such a gesture and was a little taken aback by this sudden display of emotion. Sheriel felt awkward, not understanding what exactly was happening, and asked the boy what he was doing. She was confused, but still could not hide the slight joy from this touch. She noticed how he looked at her sweetly and quietly called her mom, which touched her. This was an important moment for her, because despite everything, she felt that her son was still with her. Cardisel, slightly embarrassed, said he was just trying to express his feelings, but added that she needed to rest and recuperate. He offered her a chocolate bear to make her feel better. The boy explained that when she was sick, she needed to rest and sleep well to recover. He also insisted that with a chocolate bear, it would be much easier and faster for her to recover. Sheriel felt a strong sense of gratitude and joy as she hugged her son tighter. Her heart was filled with warmth from his care and attention, and she easily agreed to his advice. She promised that she would, of course, do everything as he said, and soon she felt much better. After a few days, she really did feel better, and she was able to take care of her son again. Soon she was going to see Cardisel, and after checking with the maid, asked if he would definitely like the surprise. The girl assured her that the information was reliable, since it came from the chef himself, and everything would be fine. The maid was sure that Cardisel would be incredibly happy when he learned that his mother had personally prepared something special for him. She felt that this could be an important moment for both of them. The lady, in turn, was worried whether he would like what she had prepared. She hoped that he would appreciate her efforts and be pleased that she had tried to do something pleasant for him. Cheriel went to her son, said goodbye to the maid, and went to Cardisel's room. She felt nervous because she wanted this gesture to be important for their relationship. When Cardisel saw his mother, he was a little surprised by her appearance. He asked if she was feeling better, as he noticed that she was still a little weak from her recent illness. Cheriel smiled and replied that thanks to his advice, she felt much better. His care had indeed had a positive effect on her, and she was grateful to him for that. She thanked her son for not forgetting about her condition and for taking the time to care for her. Cardisel noted that he was always there, as he had promised, and this made him happy that he could help his mother. He kept his promise to his mother, and Cheriel was very happy and proud of him. It was an important moment for her because her son showed care and she felt his love and attention. Cheriel asked Margot if she could help her with this little task. The maid readily agreed, knowing how important it was for her mistress that this moment should pass as well and harmoniously as possible. Cheriel said she had brought something delicious, especially for her son, so that they could eat together. She offered him a taste of what she had prepared and hoped that he would like it. Cardisel was a little surprised when he saw walnuts in front of him. He did not expect such a treat, but despite his caution, he was interested in what his mother had prepared for him. Looking at the nuts, he thought that nobles usually ate such things with forks, but he found it much more convenient to try them with his hands. He could not hide his curiosity and desire to try everything that was offered to him. His mother tried very hard because she wanted her son to be happy and feel cared for. The maid noted that the young master could well try, because the lady had really put in a lot of effort since the morning. Cardisel, of course, agreed to try the cake, but still decided to take it with his hands. He was a little embarrassed, but he wanted to try this moment to show what he was ready to do for his mother. The boy looked very cute as he listened attentively to his mother talking about her creation. He was interested in the process and wanted to understand what she had prepared for him with such excitement. When he tasted the cake, his expression changed slightly. He paused, and his reaction was a little strange, which made the mistress and maid a little wary and wait for his assessment. Cheriel and Margot waited impatiently for Cardisel's reaction. They exchanged glances and, not daring to break the silence, asked him how he liked the cake, hoping for at least some positive answer. The boy said with obvious contempt that the cake was simply disgusting. His words sounded frank, and this greatly upset the lady because she tried to make him happy with her cooking. The lady was on the verge of tears because her efforts were in vain. She sadly replied that she understood him perfectly, and now she felt like a failure. She did not expect that her cake would cause such a reaction. She wondered if perhaps she should have added more sugar, or maybe the dough didn't turn out the way she wanted. She immediately felt like she had made a mistake somewhere in the cooking process. Cheriel apologized, saying that the first time is always hard, and promised that she would try to do much better next time. She was ready to put in more effort next time. Cardisel asked in surprise if she really made the cake herself. He clearly couldn't believe that his mother decided to make something with her own hands, because he had never seen her doing such a thing before. Cheriel noted that she had heard Cassel say he liked this kind of cake before, and decided to try making it herself. She admitted that she might have gotten it wrong, but she couldn't be sure. But suddenly she noticed that Cardisel continued to eat the cake, despite his first words. This was unexpected, and she was even a little surprised by his decision, because she did not think that he would continue to eat. Cardisel continued to eat the cake despite everything. The lady tried to convince him that everything was fine and that he shouldn't force himself to eat it if he didn't like it, but he was adamant, continuing to eat it. The boy noted that he was not forcing himself and expressed his point of view. He really liked it, and he did not understand why his mother was so worried about his first impression. He continued eating because he enjoyed it and even asked the maid to bring him another piece. This was his way of showing that he didn't really dislike the cake as much as he had said before. Cheriel was sure the cake tasted terrible, but Cardisel pointed out that he just needed to taste it. He continued to assure her that it wasn't as bad as she imagined. The lady was very happy when she saw that her son continued to eat the cake. She smiled at him sincerely, feeling that he really appreciated her efforts, and it made her day a little brighter. Sheriel noticed that her son, despite everything, was behaving very nicely. His kindness and sincerity at that moment could not help but touch her. She felt that she should try harder to be better for him. Cardisel said nice things to her and ate the cakes with pleasure, enjoying the moment. Seeing her son like this, Sheriel realized that for his sake, she had to try to get closer to her husband, despite the difficulties. The lady approached the door and knocked. When her husband opened it, she immediately informed the Duke that it was she, making it clear that she had come on important business. Her voice sounded confident despite her excitement. She reminded herself to smile when he opened the door, and to be attentive, to look after herself, to act normal. Everything had to be different because her goal was to achieve something important. As soon as the door opened, Duke Lopman's right hand, Keithwell Moore, appeared before them. He looked as reserved as always, but there was a slight wariness in his eyes, because he did not know what to expect from the lady's visit. Moore thought he had been wondering for a long time who might knock, and when he saw the lady, he felt relieved. His face brightened a little, and he did not hide his joyful relief at seeing her. He informed the Duke that the lady had arrived, and the gentleman immediately felt that something important had happened. His face became serious, and he began to suspect that there was something significant behind this visit. Sheriel explained that the servants had some problems and she needed to consult with the Duke. She tried to be calm, but there was a note of concern in her voice, as if the matter was truly important. She asked the Duke for at least a minute of his time, knowing that her request might seem insignificant. But the Duke said that he was busy at the moment and could not spare the time, which only added to the tension in the situation. The lady and his right hand stood motionless in the hallway, unsure of what to do next. Sheriel couldn't figure out what to do, and Keithwell Moore seemed to be simply waiting for instructions, sensing the tension of the situation. The Duke, noticing that the lady was still standing at the door, asked if he could hear her, and added that he was really busy at the moment. He asked her to leave his office, which seemed rather abrupt. His assistant, in his usual social manner, smiled and said he had an idea. He tried to lighten the mood, but his voice lacked the confidence of his host. However, the Duke, still looking at the papers, declared that he had absolutely no business and would remain busy, despite the lady's requests. He was clearly not in the mood for communication. At that moment, both the lady and her assistant turned to the Duke at the same time. They were surprised by his behavior. It seemed that they both expected a different reaction, but he remained absorbed in his own affairs. Sheriel was shocked that he could ignore her, his wife, so easily. The Duke had seemed so excited before he arrived that he had even prepared a seat for her, but now he clearly did not want to see her. The lady suggested that the Duke should rest a little and thought that he should take a walk in the garden to clear his head. She tried to soften his attitude, but his coldness remained. The Duke, without looking up, said again that he had already said that he was busy now and could not afford to be distracted. He was determined and was not going to give in to his position. He continued to work, brushing aside her suggestions, insistently asking her to leave the office. His behavior was clearly hostile, and the lady realized that she would not get anything out of him. The servant, noticing the tension, approached the lady and apologized for the Duke's behavior. He understood that her concern was caused by his cold reception, but it seemed that the Duke was too busy today. Despite all this, Keithwell said he was glad to see her, and that at least that was a positive moment. However, his words sounded more formal than sincere. Keithwell also noticed that it was getting late and advised her to return the next morning to speak to the Duke. He tried to find some excuse for his behavior. Sheriel thanked him for his advice, but her mood was far from happy. As she tried to pull herself together, a maid approached her, clearly noticing her dejection. The maid became concerned when she noticed that the mistress seemed depressed and asked if everything was all right. Her words were full of concern. She immediately realized that something was wrong. The lady, despite her inner turmoil, still tried to smile at the maid. In fact, she felt that nothing was right, but in a strange way, it was perhaps for the best. She looked around the office, taking in its calm walls and furniture, and thought again. Thoughts swarmed in her head, but none of them could give her a clear solution to the situation. The lady realized that there was really nothing complicated about it. She just needed to come up with a good reason to visit the Duke's office again. She couldn't find another way. The next day, when all her affairs were completed, the lady was free of all obligations. Her day became completely free, and she decided to dedicate it to her son Cardisel. She thought about what story she would read to Cardisel today. It was a small treat that always brought her joy, and she wanted to make his day special. The lady turned to the maid Margot and noticed that something was wrong. There was concern in her voice, and she could not understand what exactly was bothering her at that moment. Margot said that she had just received a letter from the Marchioness of Penzel. The lady was surprised when she heard this, because she did not expect the Marchioness to address her in this way. When the lady took the letter in her hands, she was truly surprised. She began to read the words of the Marquise, and questions immediately arose in her head. What does this all mean, and why now? In the letter, the Marchioness expressed gratitude for the lady's attendance at the reception in honor of her son's birthday, and offered to repay her if she wished anything. This was unexpected and strange. The Marchioness offered to select some flowers and also some cakes for her sons if the lady wished it. It was an odd request, considering that they barely knew each other. The lady was quite surprised, as she always refused such offers. This letter seemed strange. Perhaps she did not understand its meaning or was mistaken about something. She thought that maybe this birthday was special. However, the maid reminded her that her own birthday was not yet soon, and the lady wondered about the reason for the letter. The lady came to the conclusion that perhaps she simply needed to prepare in advance. This letter could have been part of some plan, and perhaps she had not guessed its true meaning. The mistress had changed recently, and the maid Margot could not hide her admiration. She saw how much her mistress had changed and how she had become more determined and confident. The mistress felt that she could trust her maid completely. Together, they could prepare such a magnificent and extraordinary ball that she herself would not be able to believe in its success. However, she was aware that this could be perceived differently. It could look like she cared more about other children's birthdays than her own son. This made her feel insecure. It seemed that the ball was to take place in 2 weeks, and the Marchioness Penzel, strangely enough, was familiar to the lady. She could not remember from where, but the name somehow echoed in her memory. The lady tried to remember where she could have heard of Marquis Penzel. After much thought, she finally realized that she was familiar with Radius Penzel. This name was connected with her past. When the name popped into her head, the lady felt fear. She remembered details that suddenly filled her with anxiety, and it caused her an anxiety she had not expected. The whole thing was that in the novel Torn Wings, Radius Penzel was the assistant of the main character, and Cardisel killed him. The lady hoped that her son would no longer touch other people. She sincerely hoped that now, after everything, her son would leave it in the past and not harm anyone again. But her inner unrest did not leave her, and she could not get rid of these thoughts. She couldn't help but think that all this was pointless and hopeless. The lady was losing confidence in her own strength and didn't understand how to act further, what to do to protect her son. Margot, the maid, could not understand what was happening to her mistress. She observed her condition and did not know how to help until the mistress herself decided that she would not allow her son to repeat the mistake. The lady was determined that she would bring up Cardisel properly. A determination arose in her heart, and gathering her thoughts, she stood up and asked the maid to help her meet her son. The lady said she needed to see Cardisel. She hoped that the maid Margot would help her arrange a meeting so she could talk to her son and find out what was going on. The gentleman's wife was due to arrive soon, and the assistant informed him of this. He was somewhat surprised that the gentleman was still seeing the lady, despite her condition and the events that were taking place. The assistant could not believe that the gentleman met with the lady so often. It was unusual because before they tried to avoid each other, and now it seemed strange and abnormal to him. The gentleman thought he had nothing to do, and so he often talked about it. But the guy who helped him said that he had enough work and that he was already fully occupied with it. Then the Duke thought. After the accident, she had changed. She had become different. She no longer avoided him and was beginning to show interest. And this was strange and intriguing in its own way. She had often yelled at him before, demanding that he take his hands off her and not touch her anymore. Every word she said sounded like an order, and he felt her words tearing at him from the inside. He felt distant from her, because she stopped even looking in his direction. This hurt him deeply, but he still could not let her go, despite her detachment. The lady replied that she shouldn't do that at all. She couldn't understand why he kept coming to her when she was clearly asking for her space and was burdened by his presence. The gentleman tried to convey to her that he would very much like her to smile at him at least once, at least in the morning. His wish was simple, to see her friendly face, which seemed to have disappeared. But she calmly replied that she had nothing to say to him and that he should leave. Her words were cold and cutting, and it made him feel like they were drifting apart again. She was always cold to him, and he thought he would never see her smile again. He had already come to terms with it, but despite everything, deep down he hoped that the situation would change. At one point, she told him she had brought him some tea that would help with fatigue. She offered to grab a bite to eat with him, a rare gesture from her that he hadn't expected to see. She also mentioned that she heard he was patrolling the local area today and wanted to join him. It was unexpected, but there was a certain concern in her voice that hadn't been there before. She offered him a break and a chat, offering what she called a delicious pie from a local bakery. The offer was not only a simple treat, but also an attempt to ease the tension between them. Sheriel felt like she might smile too when he returned. Perhaps it was her attempt to somehow establish contact, and there was a slight hope in her words that the situation would improve. At least, that's what he hoped for. Even if the probability was small, he still waited and hoped that maybe at least this day would bring at least a few warm moments between them. Suddenly, his assistant turned to him and noticed that the Duke was working too much. He was worried about his master being overworked and thought he needed some rest. But the gentleman replied that there was nothing wrong with that, adding that work had always been a part of his life. He also tore a page out of his notebook, continuing to rewrite his thoughts. The assistant did not know what to do, but he noticed that the Duke's wife was late. This caused him additional concern, and he suggested that the Duke go and check on what was going on. But the Duke said irritably that all this was troubling him greatly. He did not like such delays and lack of information, so his mood became even more tense than before. He added that in this office, one could simply wither away from boredom and fatigue, so he decided it would be better to take a walk. The Duke did not want to stay in a closed room and feel under pressure any longer. The servant could not understand where the Duke was heading, because there were still many documents in the office that needed to be processed. He expected the work to continue, but the Duke decided to leave. The gentleman calmly said that he had to help with these documents. However, in reality, he no longer wanted to delve into the work any further, and the thought of the papers weighed on him. The assistant agreed with the Duke because he really had to help, but nevertheless, he could not get rid of the feeling that he did not want to continue to deal with these matters. The Duke knew that if he went to fetch his wife, she would most likely be in the garden. He did not discuss this, however, believing that his plans did not depend on where exactly he found her. He asked his assistant not to talk nonsense. If they met, it would be by chance. He did not plan long conversations. He was simply leaving, deciding not to sit in the office all day anymore. The Duke quickly left, no longer wanting to justify himself for spending all this time in the office. He decided that now he could pay attention to more important matters and not get stuck in one place. As he walked down the corridor, the Duke suddenly heard a child's voice. He thought it was probably his son, who was nearby as always. It was an unexpected but familiar phenomenon for him. The lady, worried, asked Cardisel why he thought she was lying to him. Her question sounded with a note of concern because she could not understand why the boy began to doubt her words. The boy shouted that she always came to her father first and insisted that she always said that he was the most important to her. He was upset that his mother now looked like she didn't love him. The boy believed that it was very important for her to be close to his father. This statement was a complete misunderstanding because he could not yet understand all the complex relationships between his parents. The Duke, having overheard this conversation, was very surprised. He did not expect that such a conversation about him and Sheriel, which was actually full of understatements, could take place right under his nose. The lady was also confused by this conversation, not knowing how to explain to Cardisel what she really felt. This created additional difficulties in their relationship, which did not please her. The Duke was confused. He stood there listening to the conversation and could not understand how he had managed to get into such a strange situation, where everything was so unpredictable and complicated. He thought about his wife. His heart had been tied to this feeling for a long time. He couldn't understand why it was so difficult to understand her when she didn't reveal her true feelings to him. The Duke finally heard Sheriel say that she liked Cardisel much more than he did. It was hard to take, especially considering that she wasn't supposed to say that. The Duke was not pleased to hear such words. He felt not only disappointment, but also irritation. This added even more tension to the relationship, which was not easy to begin with. But every time she told this to the boy, he declared that she was lying to him. Cardisel could not understand her words and constantly tried to find the truth in her answers, but she could not explain it to him. However, the lady confidently declared that she was not lying, and that was why she had come to him to ask if he wanted to play with the son of the Marquis Penzel. This proposal sounded important to her. The boy asked again, looking at his mother in surprise. She confirmed that she had indeed been invited there to the meeting. This was unexpected information for him, but he still decided that he needed to listen to his mother. The Marquis sent the lady an invitation to a party in honor of his birthday. She suggested that the boy go there with her, considering it a good opportunity for him. The boy was surprised at first, but kept silent. He did not know how to react to such a proposal. It was not what he expected, and he could not make a decision right away. Then, with a look of confusion, he looked at his mother and said that perhaps they would have to bring a gift. He wasn't sure, but he felt that it was part of the obligation that was being placed on them. Sheriel smiled and said that it would be better if she brought a gift. She thought it was an important detail that would add fun and joy to the event, and she wanted everything to go well. However, suddenly she saw that Cardisel burst into tears. He began to shout that she had not given him anything, and this shocked her. Her heart sank from the fact that the boy was so worried. Then Sheriel realized that she shouldn't have said those words about the gift. Those words may have only made things worse because she saw how much it hurt her son, but it was too late. Sheriel never celebrated her son's birthday. It was a painful day for her, and she couldn't bring herself to celebrate it. Every year she passed it by, not noticing its importance. The boy asked her if she thought that after so many years, everything would finally be okay. His voice sounded desperate. He screamed that it seemed like she wanted to hurt him again, like before. In the past, she had ordered him to call her Mama because his voice distracted her. She couldn't stand his requests, his crying, and this caused even more estrangement between them. These were the memories that haunted Sheriel. She had treated the child so cruelly that she herself could not understand how she could do it. Such memories caused her pain. Sheriel came closer to the boy and quietly said that his mother had really changed. She tried to find the words to explain it, but she could see that her son did not believe her and was not ready to forgive. However, the boy decided that he didn't need his mother. He didn't want anyone else in his life. He thought that everyone had abandoned him and didn't understand him anymore. His heart was full of bitterness and loneliness. He continued to cry and say that he no longer believed her. It was a bitter confession, full of pain. The boy could not believe that his mother had changed and now really wanted to be close. She said that his voice irritated her, and this upset him even more. The boy continued to cry. His heart was breaking with pain, and he repeated that today was his birthday. But no one noticed. Sheriel didn't see anything special in this. She thought that the boy was simply demanding too much attention, not realizing that his words were an expression of deep pain and loneliness. The boy, with tears in his eyes, asked if she was going to congratulate him. He was desperately waiting for at least a little care and recognition on this day, but it seemed that his mother did not see his needs. He wanted her to congratulate him for real, for her to show him attention and love. He dreamed that his congratulations would be sincere, and not just a formality. But Sheriel replied that he should stop acting like a child. She couldn't understand why he still held on to such childish desires, but her words sounded cold and distant. The boy continued to cry, even harder, because he wanted his mother to pay attention to him. He wanted to feel her love, but she remained closed and inaccessible to him. He cried just like he had in those days when he was little. At that moment, he felt like a helpless, lonely child again, who could not find his place in the world. These fragments of Sheriel's memories were terrible. They tormented her, like a heavy burden that would not let go. She felt how the memories of these moments continued to torment her. The main character felt such pain that if she could comfort her son in those moments, she would have done it. She would have certainly tried to regain his trust and love, but she was not ready then. If she could have congratulated him then, as he wanted, she would have done so. But now that it was all over, she decided to ask for his forgiveness, hoping to ease his pain a little. She couldn't forgive herself for doing this to this little boy. She couldn't understand how she could have remained cold and distant for so long, not seeing how much he suffered from her indifference. The boy screamed that he hated her. His words were full of pain, and he could not hide this feeling. He desperately wanted her to understand how much he suffered. He continued to cry, repeating that he really hated her. Every word he said sounded like an accusation, as if he was trying to get it out but couldn't find any comfort. Mom kept asking for forgiveness, blaming herself for leaving him alone. She tried to find words of comfort, but her own guilt did not allow her to calm him down. She said that she couldn't help, that she didn't know how to show love, and promised that it wouldn't happen again. But her words sounded empty, and the boy couldn't believe them. She took him in her arms and told him that she would give him love like no one else could give him. but words could not heal the pain he felt in his heart. The boy kept repeating that he hated her, not wanting to accept her words. But his mother insisted that she loved him very much and that she was ready to do everything for him. She suggested throwing a grand banquet for his birthday. It was a gesture to win him back, but the boy wasn't sure that was what he wanted. But the boy noticed that he didn't like it when there were too many people around. He didn't want the party to be too loud. Then she suggested that she be with him. She noticed that he liked sweets, and that if there were many people, the banquet would be huge, but this did not console him. He wanted simple privacy without unnecessary fuss. The boy said she could decide as she pleased. He was willing to let her make her own decisions without trying to influence them. He didn't care, as long as someone heard him. His mother reminded him that this was a special day for him. She wanted to make it a celebration, but she felt that she might not be able to meet all his expectations. She would like to give him something nice, asking what he would like. The boy thought. Uncertainty flashed in his eyes, but he could not answer right away. His thoughts were confused. He said he just wanted congratulations, but she didn't hear him right away and asked him to repeat it. It wasn't a request, but a quiet and almost weightless desire. He said again that he just wanted to be congratulated. These simple words were the most important to him, although he did not know if they could change anything in their relationship. The lady recalled her son's past, and a heaviness arose in her heart. These memories tormented her so much that even now she felt tears about to well up. She promised that she would try to do everything as best as possible, but warned that it would take time. She did not know whether she would be able to fulfill her promises, but she hoped that everything would work out. The boy lowered his head and said that he wanted to be congratulated before others. His words were full of hope, although he knew that perhaps this would not happen. She was a little upset, not knowing what to say. She just looked at him, realizing that despite her efforts, he still needed more time and love. She hoped that tomorrow he would make some time for her. She dreamed that they could at least spend a little of his day together. Despite all the unsaid things, she suggested throwing a party in his favorite garden, asking his opinion about it. It was her way of making the day important to him, even if he didn't ask for much. She hugged him, and the boy said he agreed. Despite his hurt feelings, he still agreed to her proposal, maybe because he wanted to feel at least a drop of her love. The Duke stood at the door all this time, watching what was happening. He remembered that the next day he had to go to the garden because an important party was planned there. Tomorrow promised to be quite a long day, so he needed to prepare in advance. Plans were already maturing in his head, and he understood that he needed to be ready for events. The next day, everyone around congratulated the little gentleman on his birthday. Surrounded by attention, Cardisel received congratulations from everyone present. The Duke noticed that it was especially noisy that day. Everything around was filled with the sounds of celebration, and the atmosphere clearly indicated that they were gathering here for an important occasion. He had worked hard with his assistant the night before, which had taken some of his strength. But now the busy day was making him feel a tension that was not related to business. He thought that everyone here seemed to have gone a little crazy. The atmosphere of the party was so bright and energetic that it was impossible not to notice how everyone was changing under its influence. As he approached, he saw a whole row of maids and servants, all dressed in festive and formal attire, which gave the event a sense of importance. Cardisel's mother, Mrs., said that this suit suited her son very well. She looked at him with pride, hoping that this day would be special and memorable for him. She smiled and wished her son a happy birthday. Her words were full of tenderness, and she hoped that this day would be joyful and full of love for Cardisel. Cardisel was a little embarrassed because not only the servants congratulated him, but also other people he knew. There was a huge cake on the table, which also embarrassed him a little. The lady had a strange feeling that someone was watching them. This feeling of uneasiness did not leave her, and she could not understand what exactly made her so worried. Looking around, she noticed that the Duke was also at the party. His presence surprised her because she did not expect him to be among the guests. She thought she might step away for a while. She needed to sort out this uneasy feeling and talk to the Duke to figure out what was going on. Approaching the Duke, she asked him why he had come. There was some surprise in her voice because she had not expected him to be interested in what was happening. The gentleman smiled and asked what was going on, noticing that she was wearing a hat that looked rather funny. He was clearly in the mood for a joke. She replied that the hat was not funny, but on the contrary, it was really difficult to make. Her words were serious, although she felt that the conversation would be light. However, the most important thing right now was that they were having a birthday party for their son. She hoped that everyone would be happy and that the day wouldn't turn into some kind of chaos. Cardisel didn't like it when there were too many people, so she decided to have the party here so he would feel comfortable and not worry about the crowd. The Duke didn't quite understand why she continued to do something she had never done before. He couldn't understand how she could change so much when she decided to spend the holiday. Usually the Duke was strict and did not like such events, but today he was generous with questions. His interest in what was happening was strange and even a little annoying. She noticed that her son was very sweet. She was sincerely proud of him because despite his character, he was charming in his own way, and she tried not to forget it. The Duke remarked that she had left her son with the nurse because she found it disgusting even to touch him. It was a strange and painful reproach, which weighed heavily on her. The lady said it was strange, but despite everything, her son was so sweet and energetic, although sometimes she still remembered the emotions she had experienced before. The Duke said that she had changed, that she was now behaving like a different person. It was noticeable, and he even began to think that she was only pretending to be herself. The lady replied that it was all connected to her changes. She suggested that they raise their son together, hoping that it would help them reconnect and reestablish harmony. The gentleman was very surprised and noticed that the lady called her son by name, but still called him Duke. This moment did not leave him indifferent and raised questions. He was surprised to notice that she didn't even remember his name, since they had never used it in all this time. This clearly made him think about their relationship. The lady tried to remember his name by addressing Margot, but she failed as she had never used it. It was strange to her, but she did not know what to do. She tried to say his name, but the Duke interrupted her, insisting that she say it now. He was persistent, not understanding the difficulty. He didn't understand why she couldn't say his name for so long, because it didn't seem like such a big deal to him. He was just surprised by her hesitation. The lady was frightened and finally called him Kian. This name, shortened and unexpected, caused mixed feelings in the Duke, which was an unusual moment for him. The Duke was very embarrassed. He heard his abbreviated name, and it was said so tenderly that it embarrassed him even more. He did not expect this from her. She noticed that he liked it when she addressed him so softly and asked him what he thought about it. She waited to see his reaction. The gentleman only became embarrassed. His face became bright red. He could not answer and simply remained silent. His reaction was clearly caused by the unexpectedness of what was happening. The lady thought that she did not remember his full name. This made her feel awkward, and she realized that she would have to wriggle out of it to avoid inconvenience. It seemed she had failed to cope with the situation. Normally, she would have put up a barrier in the relationship, but now her anxiety only increased. She did not know how to get out of it. The Duke didn't understand why she suddenly called him by his shortened name. It made him wonder what was going on between them and why everything had changed so much. He thought that maybe she really had changed. There was something clearly new in her behavior, and it made him feel unsure and even a little confused. She asked him again if he really liked it. Her words were sincere, and she was trying to understand how he was taking her changes and new treatment. The Duke told her to call him whatever she wanted. He informed her that he was not finished with his work and that it was time for him to leave. His answer was quick, and he clearly wanted to end the conversation. He left quickly, and the lady felt a little disappointed. Although she was glad that she had been able to do something, she was upset that their conversation had been interrupted like that. Meanwhile, Cardisel approached his mother and pulled her skirt. He wanted to know what she had talked about with her father. His interest was obvious, and he could not help but notice her anxiety. The boy wondered what she had said to his father. He noticed that something was wrong and could not understand why she was behaving so strangely in the presence of the Duke. The lady was surprised by his question and replied that it was nothing special, actually. But her words could not hide the slight confusion she felt at that moment. She thought that maybe he wanted his dad to congratulate him. She couldn't understand how she could miss this moment and not take into account her son's wishes on such a day. The lady apologized, explaining that Cardisel was simply angry because his mother had not invited his father to the party. This was the explanation for his mood. She noticed that his dad had actually come to wish him a happy birthday. However, he was too busy to stay long, and this greatly upset the boy. He could only come for a minute, as he was busy with other things. He could not approach his son personally, and this upset Cardisel, who had expected more attention. The boy got angry. He didn't want to listen to any more talk about his father and expressed his displeasure, because again, everything came down to the fact that his father didn't congratulate him. The lady reminded him that the party was still going on. She tried to immortalize this moment so that Cardisel would not lose the joy of the day, despite his discontent. She asked her son to speak louder because she couldn't hear him. Her words were caring. She tried to pay attention to his words so that everything wouldn't go wrong. The boy took her hand and said that they had made a cake. He was proud of it and wanted to share his achievement with his mother, hoping that it would cheer her up a little. The lady was surprised, not knowing what to do when he was so sweet. His simple desire to show the cake was so touching that she could not help but feel it. The boy turned to her, offering to try the cake. He was sure that it turned out better than usual. He was ready to share his small achievement with her. This cake was made from ingredients that were carefully selected by the lady. She chose everything with special attention, hoping that the result would please her son. The lady said she didn't bake the cake herself, but she hoped Cardisel would be pleased. She carefully selected the ingredients and hoped she could create something special. The boy hoped that she would congratulate him. He expected that his mother would notice his efforts, like everyone else's, and feel that this day was truly important to him. It was very sweet. He felt that his efforts were appreciated, and that meant more to him than words. The moment was filled with love and warmth. The lady was surprised and said that of course she would not forget this moment. Her son's birthday was the most important day for her, and she definitely could not forget such an important day. The lady noted that this party was a kind of compensation for all those moments that she had missed before. It was like compensation for the joys that she had missed. She was sure that the next moment would be even more fun. It was then that she first saw the boy smile, and that smile touched her heart. The boy asked if she was smiling, but the lady could not understand where such sadness had suddenly come from. This feeling had suddenly overwhelmed her, and she did not know how to cope with it. Suddenly, she started to cry. Her chest was tight with emotion, and she found it hard to breathe. She couldn't understand why it was so hard, because he said he wanted her to look at him, even if it was insincere, but still. The boy got scared and asked why she was crying. He sincerely hoped that she was okay, and that her tears did not mean anything bad or serious. Mother wiped away her tears and said that everything was fine. She assured him that there was no need to worry, although in fact she was not sure of her own feelings. She explained that these tears were tears of happiness. She herself did not understand how long she would have to lie to her son, because in reality she just wanted to ask for forgiveness. The boy noticed that they say sweets make you feel better. He offered her some cake with a smile, hoping it would lift her spirits and make her day a little brighter. He said that the cake was very tasty and offered her to try it. He was sure that it would help her feel better and return to a happier state. When the lady tasted the cake, she smiled. It was a simple but sincere expression of gratitude, because this gesture of the boy made her feel appreciated. The boy insisted that she eat another piece. He was sure that it would make her feel even better, because the most important thing for him was that his mother felt good. The servants were delighted. They saw how beautifully everything was working out, and now it became clear to them why they were given this life: to serve and be part of something important. The lady continued her trips, although she still felt a little strange. Perhaps it was due to the memories that she could not get rid of, despite her happiness. Perhaps it was the memories that prevented her from truly enjoying the moments of happiness. She shouldn't have felt such a burden, especially when everything seemed so good. A couple of days later, she was back in her office, working. She tried to concentrate, but thoughts of her son and the event still wouldn't leave her. She finally finished her chores, and the maid thanked her for her efforts, noting how much she had put into the job. These words helped her feel a little easier. The maid asked if the mistress was going to go to the master. She expected that the mistress should have gone already, because it was her promise that she wanted to fulfill. However, the lady said that she could not go now. The boy asked why she did not come, because he does not communicate with those who do not keep their promises. She explained that she was very sorry, but an urgent matter had come up that she had to resolve quickly. She hoped that he would understand and forgive her for this small digression. The boy said that if everything was okay, there would be no excuses next time. He believed that there should always be a place for him, and he was the most important. The lady said with a smile that, of course, no one was more important to her than he. She assured him that he would always come first, despite all her affairs. The lady informed her superior that the master was busy again. It was a new day, and she tried to leave everything as it was so as not to disturb his work. She brought him tea and asked where to put it. But the gentleman suddenly told her to sit down. The assistant immediately left, leaving them alone for a short conversation. Usually the master tells her to leave, so the mistress thought that today would be a special day when she would not have to leave his presence. The Duke noted that he always had a lot of work and practically no time to rest. Nevertheless, he allowed the lady to stay, because he did not mind her company. He said that now she could come to him whenever she wanted, and he would not drive her away, as he had before, which of course was a pleasant change. The lady thought that perhaps the Duke had finally decided to talk to her frankly, and she was delighted. She thanked him for such attention. The Duke noticed that she had previously called him by his first name, Kian. This was significant, as she had always addressed him by his title, avoiding his personal name. The lady was a little surprised, but still admitted that yes, she called him by his name again, and it became habitual for her at that moment, as if she always addressed him that way. The gentleman said that he would probably be the first one to come to her now. It was an acknowledgement of the importance of their relationship, and he noticed that it had become easier and simpler with him. The lady understood that she loved both of them, but she could not fully understand how to be with two men at the same time. This caused her internal struggle and confusion. The maid remarked that if that was the case, she had a solution to the situation. She was sure that she would find a way to help her mistress cope with her conflicting feelings. The lady was delighted to hear that the maid had found a solution, and immediately asked what kind of solution she was talking about, because it was important to her. The Duke continued to work, immersed in his papers, not distracted by conversations. He was completely occupied, but he understood that the mistress and the maid were discussing important matters. In the room with the Duke were the lady and her son. It was a moment when they were together and everything seemed perfect. But inside the lady, there was still confusion. In theory, everything was perfect, but she couldn't figure out what could go wrong. It seemed like everything should be perfect, but something kept bothering her. The maid turned to the lady and said that if she wanted to get closer to the young Duke, she had an idea. It was important, and she could help the lady in her situation. The maid suggested that they all meet together and assured them that it would please both. It was an idea that could help ease the tension and improve the relationship. The lady felt strange in the dining room. There were some difficult memories there that now prevented her from perceiving what was happening normally. The maid suggested that they simply go and have tea. She had been visiting the Duke often lately, and she could invite the young master to join them. The lady agreed because she always felt awkward when she was alone. But with her son, she was sure that everything would be fun, and the atmosphere would be much more comfortable. The lady felt that she could no longer remain silent. Her inner unrest did not allow her to continue to hide her feelings and thoughts. She wanted to be frank. She turned to the boy, trying to get his attention. She hoped that at least he would understand her condition and help her somehow cope with her worries. The boy looked at her and realized that she needed something. He was attentive to her mood and tried to understand what she wanted to say or how to help her. The Duke also turned to her and asked if she needed anything. He was ready to help, but he did not know what exactly the lady expected from him at that moment. The lady replied that she did not need anything. She did not want to say anything extra and decided that at the moment this was the best solution to avoid unnecessary conversations. The Duke said her name again, Kian. The lady began to think that he really liked it when she was called that way. This attention clearly did not leave her indifferent. The lady sighed heavily, realizing that this was true. But her thoughts were interrupted by her son, who had just approached, and she felt that her attention should be only on him now. The boy looked at her and waited for her to say something. He was always sensitive and attentive, so he knew perfectly well that the lady wanted to discuss something with him. However, the lady felt something strange in the air, as if a dark aura was gathering around her. She decided that it would be better to concentrate on talking to her son, ignoring everything else. The lady reminded him that in a few days they would go to a birthday party. She was sure that the boy remembered this important event and that everything was prepared. The boy said that only he and his mother would go to the party. It was his little dream, and he was happy that they would spend the day together without any extra people. These words immediately irritated the Duke. He immediately turned away. The Duke's efficiency was completely destroyed, and he felt deprived of focus and energy. The lady asked if he could promise her anything before their trip. She was in no hurry, but she knew there were important things that needed to be discussed before the trip itself. The boy asked what exactly she wanted. He put the book aside, ready to listen and fulfill any request she might have, always remaining open to her wishes. Cardisel, although young, still understood that he was unlikely to harm Radius now, but he still wanted to see him and talk to avoid misunderstandings. The lady noticed that it was the boy's birthday, and he would be interested in meeting someone his age. She wanted the boy not to feel lonely on this day. The boy asked if the lady really thought it was necessary. He was trying to understand how important it was for her that he interact with other children at the party. The lady noted that he had probably forgotten an important lesson she had taught him. She reminded him that he should not avoid communicating with people even if he did not like them. The boy said confidently that he remembered everything his mother had taught him. He knew that she had said that it was important not to ignore people just because you didn't like them. The lady praised him, saying that he was a clever boy. She was glad that the boy understood her words and was ready to apply them in life. This meant a lot to her. The lady also added that she wanted the boy to make friends and have a good time with them. She dreamed of him being happy and being able to enjoy communication. She asked him to promise that he would try. She knew that if he promised, he would do it, and that gave her confidence in the future. The boy agreed, promising his mother that he would try. He always wanted her to be proud of him and was ready to fulfill her requests, despite his youth. He said he didn't even have to say it because he knew his mother was always right. He believed her and wanted her to be happy with his actions. The lady was increasingly surprised at how her boy could be so obedient. He always listened attentively to her words, and this was the greatest happiness for her. Suddenly, she noticed how the papers began to crumble, and her gaze involuntarily moved towards the Duke. He was still sitting, not paying attention to what was happening in the room. The lady asked the boy to wait on the sofa while she got up and went to the Duke. She felt she had to do something to help him with his affairs. The Duke had been overworked lately, and her attention to his problems was important. Perhaps his irritation was due to his inability to concentrate due to fatigue. The lady approached the Duke and anxiously asked if he was all right. She noticed his fatigue and suggested calling a doctor to make sure everything was okay. The Duke replied that there was no need for a doctor, but he took her hand. He asked her seriously if their son was really as good as she thought. His look was sincere. The lady replied that this was certainly so. After all, the boy was their son, and this confirmed her words. She was proud of him, and her confidence left no doubt. The Duke glanced at his son and fell silent for a moment. He was pleased, but his gaze indicated that everything that concerned the family was important and significant to him. The boy smiled and said happily that he was really good. He laughed. His emotions were sincere, and at that moment his joy was noticeable to everyone. The gentleman agreed with this, adding that the boy was even pleased with the slightest manifestations of care. He was very sweet, and this childish spontaneity was to his advantage. The lady also smiled, looking at these two. Her joy was sincere because they were both the most important part of her life, especially since the moment she was reborn. The Duke and his son looked at her with curiosity. They could not understand why she was suddenly smiling like that and began asking questions, trying to find out what was the reason for her joy. The lady realized that if they continued to solve her riddle, they would soon laugh at her. She decided to keep her smile a secret, thinking that it was just a passing mood. She explained that she was smiling simply because she was having fun. It was a simple but sincere explanation, and she didn't want to complicate the situation. The lady suggested taking a short break and having some tea. The Duke agreed, realizing that it would help him relax and spend some time in a calm environment. The boy, however, sat in the corner and looked at his father with displeasure. He was not at all pleased with what was happening and did not seem to share the mood of the adults at that moment. The maid, noticing what was happening, wished the young master and mistress good luck on the road. She was ready to help, but she understood that they had an important trip ahead of them. Cardisel pulled his mother's skirt and said that his ribbon had come undone. It was unexpected, and he himself felt a little awkward, but he still needed help. The lady was surprised, but thought that he simply did not know how to tie ribbons yet. She knew that the time would come and he would learn, but now her help was needed. The boy said nothing more, and his mother noted that there was nothing to worry about. She offered to help him because it was important to her that he felt confident. The lady helped him with the ribbon, and at that moment the Duke approached them. He asked if they were ready to go. His voice was calm, but there was an insistence in it. The lady was frightened when she suddenly saw him behind her. She did not expect him to appear and immediately felt some tension from the fact that he approached so quickly. She thought that perhaps he wanted to discuss something important before they left, but she hoped that he was not going to go with them and that she had misunderstood something. The lady thought that Kian simply wanted to wish them good luck before they left. It would be quite logical, and she did not think that his intentions could be anything else. The Duke didn't understand what had happened at all. His face was calm, but inside he felt something disconcerting. He didn't know how to behave correctly at this moment. The Duke said he simply had to go to headquarters, so he left soon after. His business required immediate attention, and he could not afford to linger. The lady thought as she saw him leave. She was a little worried about how things would go and wondered when the Duke would ever find time for himself. The Duke's assistant also told the lady to wait a little. He was polite, but his words were filled with a little impatience, since time was passing and everyone had to move on. He noticed that it was a coincidence, because it seemed like everyone was going the same way. It seemed strange, but it was obvious to him that their paths were crossing. The Duke offered to ride in the same carriage, but Cardisel refused at once. He declared that he would never ride in the same carriage with him, and his decision was unshakable. The Duke, without objection, said that it was no problem for him. He was prepared to travel in a separate carriage if it was important to the boy, but he himself did not consider it a big problem. The lady noticed that they would be uncomfortable in such a small carriage, and this worried her. She thought that it would be better if they went in another way, but she did not argue. The boy basically said the same thing. He emphasized that it was really inconvenient and suggested choosing another carriage so that the trip would be comfortable for everyone. The Duke said there was no need for that. He was sure that this place was enough for them, and he saw no point in changing the plan. His decision was firm, and he did not argue. The lady noticed that they were all acting strange today. She couldn't understand why everything was going so unusually. This made her feel a little uneasy, but soon she decided not to ask questions or find out details. Everything was clear, and she herself understood what was happening, without the need for further explanations. The lady decided that Kian wanted to get to know Cardisel better. That's why he insisted on traveling together, trying to establish contact, which was natural for them. Her husband, on the other hand, was just shy. She knew he was trying, and she decided she needed to support him so that the trip would go smoothly and comfortably for everyone. The lady agreed that they would travel separately and asked that a separate carriage be prepared for them so that they could set out together. Her words were confident. Her husband and son did not expect such a decision. They were both surprised by her determination, but this did not stop them from agreeing with her plan, because she always knew what to do. The boy immediately jumped into the carriage and declared that he would be quite comfortable alone. He was confident in his choice and did not demand any additional changes. The lady was surprised that the Duke suddenly remembered his business and began to doubt. He had always been a man of action, but at that moment it seemed unexpected. The lady began to doubt. Maybe she had made a mistake in her decision. But she could not leave her son alone, and so she decided to go with him despite all the doubts. She approached Cardisel and told him that this would be his first meal out. She wanted him to feel comfortable and at ease in his new surroundings. The lady tried to calm her son down, telling him not to be nervous, but the boy replied that he didn't care. He was already used to such situations and didn't worry. The lady thought that he had calmed down already, but it seemed that this was not the case. She noticed that his emotions were not as stable as she had hoped. She mentioned that someone had said that the Marquise made very tasty desserts. This piqued the boy's interest, and he immediately paid attention to her words. The boy asked again, not believing his ears. You could see how his mood changed when he heard about the tasty treats, which gave him some energy. The lady knew that by mentioning his favorite delicacy, she would hit the mark. The boy perked up, and that was exactly what she wanted to achieve. His joy. She noticed that he liked walnut cake again and asked for that dessert to be prepared. It was his favorite treat. The boy was delighted to hear that there would be walnut cake. His face immediately lit up and he showed obvious satisfaction at the forthcoming treat. He thought that maybe the lady thought he was small and that he could be lured with food. There was nothing strange about it, but he liked it. The lady noticed that last time she had failed to please him with his favorite cake, and now she hoped that this dessert would be to his taste. The boy said with a smile that the cake was delicious. Although it was not entirely true, he still ate it with pleasure. It was cute and funny for everyone present. He lied, but he still ate the whole cake, and his behavior was involuntarily cute. His simple naivety only emphasized his attractiveness. The boy noticed the lady's smile and asked what made her so happy. He was genuinely surprised by her reaction and did not understand what caused her laughter. The lady smiled again and apologized, realizing that his simplicity made everything even more endearing. She noticed that he was simply too sweet not to smile. The boy said that even without this, he would have behaved well. He was confident and did not need additional praise, although he was still happy with the attention. The lady replied that she very much hoped that he would make friends with someone along the way. She was sure that the journey would bring him new acquaintances and useful connections. Meanwhile, the maids noticed that a very unusual carriage had pulled up to them. It was elegant and eye-catching, and everyone realized that the Duchess had arrived. The maids greeted the master and mistress by bowing and expressing their respect. This was a manifestation of their due attention to high society. The boy got out of the carriage and offered his hand to his mother, helping her out. He was well-mannered and readily offered his help to make her feel comfortable. The mother thanked him, noting that with such a companion, she felt like a queen. It was a flattering comparison, which the boy, of course, appreciated. The butler suggested that the lady take a walk in the garden. It was a good time to relax and discuss important issues, as well as to enjoy nature. The boy noticed that there was a very large cake in the garden. He was a little surprised by its size, but quickly realized that his cake would be even bigger than the one they had seen. However, his cake was even bigger, and this made him happy. He was pleased that he was right, and this lifted his spirits, giving him confidence. He hid his interest so sweetly that it made him even more charming. His attempts not to show his emotions only increased the impression. The Marchioness met the Duchess in the garden, greeting her with respect and joy. She was pleased that she had come and decided to talk to her in a more relaxed atmosphere. She noted that she had not expected the lady to visit and expressed gratitude for her accepting the invitation. It was an important event for her. Cheriel thanked the Marquise for the invitation and said that she was glad to have the opportunity to visit her. The Marquise was also glad that the lady had come with her son. The Marquise noted that her son Radius had no friends among his peers. She expressed concern that he was missing out on interactions with children his own age. Cheriel was eager for her son to make friends, and she noticed that while Cardisel might look disgruntled, he was actually happy to be there. Cheriel thought that she and the boy would get along. The lady also noted that her son would like to meet the son of the Marquise in order to find a friend among the children. She was sure that her son was very sweet, having inherited the kindness inherent in his mother. Cheriel was proud of him, considering him the best example of upbringing. The Marquise smiled happily and asked not to embarrass her. She was pleased to meet them in such surroundings, but tried not to show excessive excitement. They set up projectors so that guests could see the cutest moments with Radius. It was something new, and everyone was looking forward to this presentation. When Cheriel heard about the projector, she didn't even know that such devices existed in this world. It was a new experience for her, and she waited with interest. She was looking forward to having the opportunity to use the camera. She would like to capture the sweetest moments on her son's face, capturing everything. Cheriel said she wanted to know where she could purchase a projector like this. She was interested in being able to capture these moments for years to come. The Marquise replied that there was a light next to the lady that was used for such things. This allowed Cheriel to better understand what was being discussed. Cheriel was scared and said she wouldn't take a picture when she noticed a light. This light was special, and she decided she wouldn't interfere with the process. She quickly realized what this meant. She was about to imprint all of her son's faces into her memory. It was connected with a new technique, and she was a little stunned. The Marchioness expressed regret that this was so, but confirmed that Radius was indeed very nice. The party was intended for children, and they were the main characters of the event. She invited Cheriel to join the event, noting that mothers often sat separately, enjoying the fellowship. It was an offer worth accepting. The boy asked his mother if she would go there. He was a little worried because he didn't know what to expect from the evening and wanted his mother to stay close. Cheriel reassured her son, telling him not to worry. She asked him to promise to behave, because they would be separated for a short time, and she needed to trust him. The butler asked where he should take the master's things. He was ready to do his job and continue to provide comfort to his masters without asking unnecessary questions. The Marquise assumed that Cheriel was worried about her son. She knew that this was the mother's first experience meeting her children at such meetings, and that she was worried. Cheriel confirmed this and added that this was her son's first experience interacting with his peers. He had never been to such events before, and everything was new to him. Cheriel didn't often attend such events. It was new to her, and she wasn't quite sure how to behave in such a company. But she decided to trust the situation. Marquise noted that in the future, Cheriel will be attending these meetings more often. It is a great opportunity to talk about children and discuss their development. The Duchess was delighted to be able to take part. The Marchioness immediately told her where the ladies' table was so that she could relax and enjoy the event. She announced that the Duchess of Loperam had arrived and asked everyone to greet her. The entire hall was soon filled with gracious greetings and respect. The lady noted that she had only heard about Cheriel, but had never met her in person. Now she had the opportunity to get to know the lady better. The Marchioness invited the Duchess to try the desserts, singling out the cookies their chef had prepared for the evening. She was sure that the guests would like them. Cheriel thanked him for the offer and said that the cookies were indeed very tasty. It was not her first experience of tasting, but she was still satisfied. The Marchioness promised that she would definitely ask for more cookies the next time the Duchess came. Sheriel thanked her and said that she would invite her to her son's birthday. The woman continued to watch the Duchess closely as she conversed with the Marchioness. Her gaze was attentive and curious, but she tried not to be intrusive. She said that since she was here, she wanted to ask a question. It was a request she couldn't resist, and she wanted to know something important for herself. The lady started the conversation by telling her that she had recently gotten a dog. Sheriel wasn't quite sure why this was mentioned and didn't know what to make of it. She added that owning dogs is not a cheap hobby. She was raising an important question that Sheriel found a little odd, but still interested her. The lady asked what to do with dogs that do not obey their owners. This was a serious question for her, and she expected wise advice from Sheriel. She asked what the Duchess of Loperam would say about this. She was interested in the experienced lady's opinion on the subject of raising pets. Sheriel didn't understand what was being said and asked again. She wasn't sure she understood the question correctly and tried to clarify the details. The lady asked again, thinking that if the dog was not listening, then perhaps it was worth spending more time training it. This could help improve the situation. The woman did not understand why she should keep a dog if it was not obedient. She believed that it was useless, because if the pet does not behave as it should, then why keep it? One of the ladies remarked that perhaps the dog should simply be thrown out on the street, as it was expensive and did not know its place. It was beautiful in appearance. The woman who asked about the dog remarked that her pet should certainly be more obedient. She was sure that something had to be done about it. She thought that now she probably understood why her dog had been sold. Apparently, her personality had been the problem, and she herself was partly to blame for it. Her owner turned out to be a foreigner, and perhaps that was what got her into trouble. She thought he just didn't understand how to raise animals. The woman did not quite understand what they were talking about, because they were talking about her dog. The lady, however, seemed to have guessed that they were discussing her pet and listened attentively to the conversation. The woman also mentioned that the owner might be a foreigner. She thought that might be an important fact that would help to understand the situation. The woman thanked the lady for her opinion and admitted that her dog sometimes behaved stupidly, but she promised that she would try to train her pet. Sheriel felt angry, not understanding that this woman even allowed herself to discuss her pet in such a tone. She considered it unacceptable. They say high society is a battlefield, but Sheriel decided she would intervene anyway. Despite the strangeness of the situation, she couldn't remain indifferent. Sheriel wanted to see her son as soon as possible and hoped that he was having a great time. This was an important point for her in this situation. The woman turned to the lady, reminding her that she was going to invite guests to her mansion. This was the moment when Sheriel had to show confidence. The woman asked again if the lady was sure that this was a good idea. Sheriel did not understand what kind of situation she was being drawn into, but she was sure that she could not lose. The lady smiled and said confidently that she was absolutely sure of her decision. She also added that she did not think she should let them interfere with her plans. Sheriel replied that she was not afraid of the Duke's actions, as she saw no reason to worry. She believed that there was no need to worry about his opinion. The lady noticed that it was now clear to her that the Duke simply did not care, and she could no longer enjoy the moment. She felt that the mood was spoiled. The Marchioness intervened, offering to share her thoughts on the topic under discussion. This was the moment when her opinion could play a key role in the conversation. Sheriel was upset because she felt that the Marquise was now on the side of those she didn't like. This only added to her inner tension. Sheriel mentioned that she had a beautiful parrot that sometimes said strange things. These phrases always left her wondering, not knowing where he got them from. She added that the parrot was sometimes rude and boorish, and Sheriel could not understand where he got such manners from. This question remained a mystery for her, which was not solved. Sheriel couldn't understand whether this woman was really standing up for her, or was simply beating everyone in a row, not paying attention to the reasons and circumstances. Sheriel expressed her displeasure, saying that she found it unpleasant and asked how the lady had handled the situation, trying to understand her position. The Marquise replied that she could not change anything because it was just a bird, not a person, and cutting out its tongue was useless. It still did not understand what it was saying. She knew that this guy often communicated with the knight, and now he began to show him even to guests. It was shameful, because such relationships were not hidden. Then the Marchioness advised that in future the ladies should avoid displays of rudeness and boorishness, otherwise everyone could find themselves in an awkward situation. The woman Sheriel called a dog was furious at these words, and her anger was obvious to everyone around her. She could not contain her emotions. She started shouting that she remembered that she had forgotten to do something important and that she urgently needed to leave, getting confused in her words and irritating those around her. The other guests also began to rise, saying that it was time to return home as it was getting late. They thanked for the invitation and said goodbye. The Marchioness apologized for all the inconvenience, smiled, and wished everyone a safe journey, despite the fact that some of those present were unhappy. The main character thought that the Marquise gave the impression of being a very strong woman, and noticed that she now had an appetite again. Sheriel offered the lady to eat more cookies, to which the lady replied with a smile that she would gladly try some more, enjoying the moment. The two of them remained at the table, and the atmosphere between them became pleasant. It was easy to talk, and Sheriel felt comfortable next to her. Meanwhile, the children continued to play near the dessert table. The boy was enjoying a nut pie, enjoying the taste of his favorite dish. The Marquise's son, noticing that it was time for a break, suggested that they pause the game to rest a little and talk with Cardisel. He looked towards the boy and said that he would be back soon, assuring him that he would stop playing for a while to discuss something important. Approaching Cardisel, he smiled and asked him if he liked the dessert, hoping that the boy would appreciate their treats and find them delicious. The boy replied that the dessert was very tasty, but he actually wanted to continue playing with the children, so he stayed nearby despite the delicious treat. It was quite funny because he himself was still a child, although different from the others, playing with them more out of necessity. But his mother said she wanted him to make new friends and have fun. She thought being around kids would help him become more open. If he did not keep this promise and continued to avoid communication, his mother might begin to become disappointed in him, which was an unpleasant thought for the boy. So he started a conversation with Cardisel, offering him a cake to try, trying to engage him in conversation and get him interested in communication. The boy was surprised when he was asked if he knew who he was, and decided that it was an interesting question that was worth answering, despite the strangeness of the situation. Cardisel replied that he did not know the boy, and frankly speaking, saw no need to recognize someone of lower status than himself. The boy said he could give a hint. This cake was made by their pastry chef, and perhaps Cardisel should pay attention to it. Cardisel suddenly realized that the person standing in front of him was Radius Pensel, a guy who had recently impressed him with his mannerisms and behavior. He realized that this guy was the culprit of everything that was happening, and the boy immediately noticed that this was indeed the case. I wonder if he envied him because of this. Radius replied that he was not jealous at all. This surprised Cardisel, and he could not help but ask why he was so sure of his feelings. The boy said that his mother would now congratulate him every year on this event. He was glad that everything turned out this way and hoped that everything would be fine. Radius, noticing how Cardisel blushed, asked him what had happened to him. But he did not answer and asked why he had come up to him at all, since they were having fun without him. Radius said that he looked much more interesting than all the others, and it would be impolite to leave him alone. He clearly valued Cardisel's company and did not want to let him go. Cardisel realized that Radius clearly wanted to talk, and he noted that his mother often praised him for his behavior and manners, which was quite unusual. Then Cardisel, after thinking for a moment, said that his mother also praised him tirelessly. He knew how proud she was of him and his successes. Radius, curious, asked if he was sure his mother praised him often, since his mother seemed to do so much more often than Cardisel's mother. Cardisel, in response to this remark, said that his mother does not even let him rest, always demanding more and more. Radius noted that Cardisel's mother does a lot for him. Cardisel did not go into these thoughts. He was not worried because he knew that his mother was the most important person for him and was not comparable to anyone. He didn't worry too much about anyone praising other kids because his mom, unlike others, actually knew how to support him. At that moment, a chubby boy approached them and remarked that he thought that Radius Pensel had abandoned them to discuss something important and was not just playing with a child. Radius noted with a smile that he probably should have gathered a company for the game and not come to them unnecessarily because it was his responsibility. The chubby boy started shouting that the Radius knew nothing, saying that this boy was a savage with the blood of a thief. There was clearly aggression in his words. He also added that his mother said that if he even went near this boy, he would be cursed for life. This made everyone embarrassed. Cardisel couldn't help but laugh and asked if he could answer for his words, since such accusations could not go unanswered. The guy confidently replied that of course he could, and seemed to think that Cardisel would be scared. He even tried to make his face more serious. One of Father's assistants, noticing the situation, intervened, stating that Cardisel was a member of one of the most noble families of the empire, and he needed to learn to have manners. He said that when Cardisel grew up, he wouldn't even dare to raise his head in the presence of these people. This was because his status was so high. Carditzel understood that this was just empty talk. He was not going to take these threats seriously and considered such words not worthy of attention. Cardisel also noted that he was well aware of these rumors, and perhaps the guy was simply not smart enough to control his words in the presence of the future Duke. The boy, hearing this, became very frightened and blushing asked what Cardisel was really talking about, hoping that he was not taking his threats seriously. Radius asked what Cardisel was going to do. Cardisel calmly replied that he shouldn't have mentioned his father's title, since he wasn't going to do anything. Radius, not understanding why Cardisel answered so calmly, asked if he thought it was shameful. He expected the guy to react differently. The boy said he had promised his mother that he would get along with the children, so he intended to avoid conflicts. Radius said he also wanted to add something. Radius emphasized that his mother told him that he shouldn't bully his friends because of rumors. It was a very bad thing to do, and he didn't want to do it. At that moment, the same woman with her friends who had previously talked about the dog ran up to them and called Varan, inviting him to leave with them. She shouted loudly that they had to leave here immediately and did not want to stay and watch the situation continue to develop. The boy was a little surprised, but quickly ran to his mother, clearly not wanting to stay in such strange surroundings and feeling that he did not belong here. Cardisel noted that he was told to befriend this boy because they were the same age, but adults often forget that children think and play in their own way. He added that adults should not behave like these people because they do not follow their own rules, and children are always more sincere and honest in their actions. The Marquise noticed that communicating with her son always made her lose track of time. At such moments, it seemed that time simply disappeared, and she did not notice how the hours passed. Cheriel agreed with her words, adding that she also has moments when time flies by when she is with her son, and these moments are always important to her. The Marquise, amazed, remarked that she had not even thought that she and the lady were so similar in this regard. Many say that her love for children is excessive, but she does not consider this something bad. The Marquise agreed, then turned to Cheriel, asking how she usually spent her time with Cardisel, what helped her feel calm and happy. The lady began to answer, but suddenly felt a dizziness that pierced her consciousness, and for a moment she lost the thread of the conversation, trying to collect her thoughts. A memory from her childhood flashed through her mind when her father always shouted that she should strive more for high society, because her appearance was all she had. Back then, as a child, she couldn't understand why her appearance was what her father put first, but she felt that there was a bitterness and helplessness in it. Suddenly, the memory disappeared, and Cheriel felt a strong sense of malaise, as if it was not real, but only a fantasy that caused painful sensations. The Marquise, noticing that the lady was not looking well, approached her, asking with concern if everything was all right, ready to offer her help if needed. The lady replied that everything was fine, and assured that her anxiety was only related to thoughts about her son, and that it was not at all related to her health or other problems. The Marquise, noticing how much Cheriel was worried about Cardisel, suggested that they could go together and check if everything was okay with him, if she was so worried. The lady thanked her for the offer and agreed to go. She felt relieved by such attention and understanding that her anxiety had not gone unnoticed. Soon they went out with the Marchioness and the maids, and the lady thought of her son, confident that Carditzel could not hurt anyone, and most likely everything would be fine. The lady had confidence in her son. She knew his character and believed that he could not be to blame for the conflict, although she had heard rumors about how he could behave. Despite this, she remembered the novels she had read about similar situations, and thought that in her case, Cardisel would most likely also show abilities for peaceful solutions. When they arrived, the lady immediately noticed that the maids were somehow uncomfortably disposed, and their behavior seemed strange, as if they were afraid of something or were hiding something. The maids were frightened when they noticed the mistress approaching, and one of them decided to explain what had happened, quickly telling about the misunderstanding between Carditzel and Mr. Churdy. The maid said that there had been a misunderstanding between Mr. Loper and Mr. Churdy, which had led to Cardisel crying, which had greatly disturbed everyone present. The lady was shocked to hear this. She could not believe that her son was crying, and this news hit her like a blow, making her feel helpless and confused. The realization came late. She realized that she had been wrong to perceive her son as an adult capable of handling situations, but he was still just a child. The lady glanced at the woman standing next to her son and instantly recognized her. It was the same woman who had made fun of her dog and had said unpleasant things about Cardisel more than once. The son, seeing his mother, rushed to her, bursting into tears, and the lady hastened to embrace him, pressing him to herself in order to calm and comfort him at that moment. She reassured him, promising that everything would be fine and that she was there, despite his worries and fears, which did not allow him to feel confident. The lady asked him with concern if everything was all right, and in a soft voice asked why he was crying, unable to understand what could have upset him so much. At that moment, she felt that she needed to find out who exactly was the reason for her son's tears, and she was ready to do anything to punish the one who dared to offend him. The lady turned her gaze to the woman standing next to her and immediately realized that it was she who had insulted Cardisel, starting with ridicule of the dog, and then offended him as well. Unable to bear it any longer, Sheriel turned to Mrs. Churdy with a request to explain and tell what had happened between her and her son, since she could not ignore it. The lady lowered her head and sadly reported that her son had only said that he had made a small mistake, not thinking that it could cause such consequences. She asked again if her son was really crying over something so insignificant. She couldn't understand what could upset him so much. The woman, feeling agitated, did not know how to properly connect words to express her feelings, and many thoughts arose in her head. Radius, noticing her confusion, intervened, suggesting that if everyone agreed, he himself could explain what was happening to ease her anxiety a little. The Marquise approached her son and, trying to calm him down, noted that she had already had to tell him that he shouldn't communicate with impolite people. She reminded him that he was a member of a noble family and should control himself, avoiding communication with those who were not worthy of his attention. Radius said that he knew that he was smart and well-mannered, but it was still better to listen to his mother's advice to avoid unnecessary troubles. The Marchioness, feeling guilty, asked her mistress's forgiveness for allowing such unpleasant moments to interfere with such an important tea party. She knew perfectly well that she shouldn't have allowed this to happen, but the lady calmly replied that everything was fine and there was no need to apologize. However, her only concern was why her son was crying, and she was eagerly waiting to find out the reason for his tears. She also asked if the woman had properly apologized to her son for her behavior and had not neglected him. Sheriel noted that she would not have been so patient, and probably the lady knew very well that it was not easy for her to endure such unfair treatment either. At some point, the woman decided to tell that her son had offended Cardisel, insulting him as a descendant of a barbarian, which greatly offended the Duke's entire family. Sheriel asked again if she really thought that could justify her son's behavior, since they are often subjected to humiliation, even if he is just a child. She stressed that this boy probably succumbed to gossip and other people's opinions, which led to such behavior, without realizing the seriousness of the situation. Cardisel, trying to calm his mother, said that the boy claimed that when communicating with him, people became cursed, but the lady immediately punished him. She said she thought the act was serious enough to affect the child's behavior, but Sheriel noticed that she had hit her son. The woman was a little embarrassed, not knowing how to answer, because she did not expect that her actions would cause such consequences. The lady noticed that she had hit her son, and this indicated a lack of conscience, especially since she had to apologize to him. The lady made a remark that now she should ask her son for forgiveness, and she should make sure for herself that he received the punishment he deserved. Sheriel, leaning towards her son, her voice irritated, asked him to quickly ask for forgiveness, since he did not seem to understand the importance of his actions. The boy, however, protested, refusing to apologize, and the woman swung at him again, shouting that he had apparently misunderstood her intentions. At this point, Ms. Sheriel intervened, calmly and confidently stating that she had to intervene, or things could end badly for everyone. The woman stopped, but still shouted at her son not to hold a grudge about what was happening and to prepare to apologize. Sheriel insisted that he had to apologize right now. Otherwise, the situation would not be resolved, and all the consequences would fall on his shoulders. The boy, with tears in his eyes, admitted that he did not want to offend anyone and sincerely asked for forgiveness, realizing his mistake. The woman, looking at him, asked for forgiveness for her son's behavior, wondering where he could have heard such strange and unpleasant things. However, Duchess Sheriel, with a cold expression on her face, shouted at her to immediately take her hands away from her son. Otherwise, the consequences would be very unpleasant. Sheriel added that she would not touch Cardisel with the same hands that had just harmed her son and would not tolerate such behavior again. She promised that all this would be discussed with her husband, and she would let him know how everything happened so that he would understand the seriousness of the situation. The woman tried to stop the lady, continuing to apologize and asking her not to take such serious measures and not to inform her husband. The boy continued to cry, and the woman's heart sank with pain, realizing how hard it was for him to go through what was happening. She couldn't understand why this woman was treating him so cruelly, because he was completely innocent of the current situation. She felt that the boy did not deserve such treatment and firmly told the lady that children are not toys, but living people with feelings and rights. Therefore, Duchess Sheriel, trying to restore justice, said that there can be no forgiveness for such behavior, and this must be understood. She announced that they were about to leave, and taking her son in her arms, she headed toward the carriage. There was a hint of weariness in her eyes, but despite this, she continued walking. Upon returning home, the first thing she decided to do was go to her husband, feeling the need to discuss what had happened. He needed to hear everything that had happened to her. This insult was much more than a personal offense. She understood that this humiliation affected not only her, but their entire family. It was too much for her. She returned holding her son in her arms. She told him that she was sorry for leaving so abruptly. She didn't want it to happen that way. The boy calmly replied that he didn't see anything wrong with it. He had played with the children and eaten, and none of this had caused him any concern. He said that he had behaved well, had not offended anyone, and had kept all the promises he had made. This was important to him, and he was proud of it. The boy added that he would be glad if she did not leave him. He always obeyed her, and it was important to him that her words came true. She, not understanding where he got such thoughts from, asked him what made him think that she was going to leave him. She never received an answer from him. The boy was silent, but he said that everything always happened like this. So this time, nothing had changed for him. He saw no reason to worry. The lady lowered her eyes, realizing that his fears were well-founded. Only 2 months had passed since their reconciliation, and she could understand his concerns. However, it remained a mystery to her why Sheriel was so cold towards her son. It remained unclear to her, despite all her efforts. Every time her son said such words, her heart would shatter into tiny pieces. She felt her emotions filling her soul with pain. She began to think that he was not her real son, but only a fictional character from a novel she had once read. This comparison tormented her. She hoped that the boy was not lonely and apologized again, promising that she would always be there for him. However, he said that he did not like it when adults lied. He said she had to keep her promise, and she couldn't understand why he was so worried about it. She felt that lying in this case was unnecessary. The boy lowered his head again and said that he himself had kept his promise, which meant that perhaps something else was waiting. It sounded like a hint of something inevitable. The lady thought for a moment, not knowing how to respond to this. The boy seemed to be waiting for her to continue, but she could offer nothing definite. He decided that her silence meant that there would be nothing more. He took her silence as a sign that it was over, and there was no point in waiting. But she suddenly asked him why he had decided so, assuring him that he had done the right thing and had been very brave. This was unexpected for him. The lady promised to fulfill one of his wishes. It was important to him, and his face lit up with a smile when he realized that his request would be fulfilled. The boy, smiling happily, asked several times if it was really true. He could not believe that his wish could be fulfilled so quickly. She said that if that was his wish, she would read him a bedtime story. It was a simple but important promise that she was willing to keep. The lady was surprised by such a wish, not expecting that he would ask for exactly this. It seemed unexpected to her, and she was a little confused by his request. The boy confirmed that this was indeed his wish. He was glad that his request was heard, and his face glowed with happiness. This dog often bragged that his mother read him fairy tales every night. The lady did not understand what child he was talking about, and she found it strange. The boy mentioned that he was talking about the radius, since they had already met and become friends. This became an important moment in his life, because the new friend immediately became close to him. The lady asked again if it was true that this boy was really his friend. She could not believe that such a new acquaintance could become her son's friend so quickly. The gentleman remarked that all this sounded wonderful. She expressed a desire to see this boy next time and get to know him, because it all looked very interesting. Mother promised to prepare a cozy place for them where they could play quietly, without worrying about the outside world and without being distracted by extraneous noises. However, her son said that he was not very keen on meeting this boy. But if there was walnut cake, he might agree to meet. The lady assured him that if he insisted, she would definitely make sure that a cake with nuts was made for him, especially at his request. When they arrived, she noticed that the sun had almost disappeared behind the horizon. It had been a hard day, and everyone was tired, although they had spent it quite actively. It was approaching summer, and she suggested to her son that they go boating when the weather became warmer to enjoy the fresh air and warm waters. The boy asked again if he could really go on a boat with her. He was a little surprised, but still interested in the idea. She replied that they would go with the whole family, including her father. Everyone would be able to enjoy time on the water together, and it would be fun for everyone. Shariel asked him if he thought it would be fun, and he said he didn't think it was that special, but he wouldn't say no. She assured him that it would always be more fun with family, because his father loved him as much as she did. Together, they would have an unforgettable time. The boy said that if she promised that she would never leave him and would be there, then he wouldn't mind going on the boat with them. The lady thanked him for this decision, and he looked at her with gratitude, realizing that her words were sincere and warm. She said that Mom would try for her son and gave him a warm smile that showed all her love and care for him. When the lady was already in her room, she thought about what Lady Churdy had meant at dinner. Her words left a mark on her mind. Perhaps Shariel was forced into marriage with Kian because it was unclear why he was suddenly called a barbarian. It all seemed strange and confusing. She couldn't understand why she left the boy alone at such an important moment, why she did it, and what really happened in her life. And what was even more surprising was that her husband said that she hated him. This accusation sounded strange, especially considering their family relationship. Everything about etiquette and social norms seemed forced upon her from the start. Once she was here, everything seemed foreign and alien, but Shariel had no memory of her family, which added to her anxiety. She felt like something was wrong, and her past was hidden under a veil of oblivion. She needed to remember what she had forgotten. So she turned to the maid, hoping for her help in revealing secrets and restoring what was lost. The maid immediately asked if her mistress had called her. She came upon hearing her mistress's name, ready to help with any questions that might arise. Shariel asked if there was prejudice against foreigners in the empire. It was an important question for her, because she felt the burden of it. The maid dropped the dishes from her hands. She was so shocked by the question that her reaction was instantaneous. She did not expect such frank interest. The maid was interested in why the mistress suddenly decided to ask such a question. She was curious about what led her to this question and what she really meant. She apologized to the lady if she had offended her in any way. But the lady reassured her, saying that everything was fine and that Margot shouldn't worry. It's just that something unpleasant happened at the meeting with the Marquise. The Countess's son said that Cardisel had savage blood in his blood. He claimed that if his children approached Cardisel, they would be cursed by his presence, that he was ill-mannered and not worth attention. The maid thought that the mistress was asking about this precisely because of these words, but she was not sure. The lady replied that in fact her memory was still recovering from that accident, and that was why she was interested in it. This explanation immediately became clear to the maid, and she felt relieved. The lady closed her eyes and understood why she liked the young master so much. However, she quickly corrected herself, saying that she had been mistaken in her thoughts. The lady stressed that she should not allow herself to think that everything will return to the way it was before the accident. She admitted that she really loves her son, and there is no kinder and sweeter child in the world than him. The maid said she understood, but advised her not to tell the Duke about her memory problems. But the mistress did not understand why the maid thought so. She asked what exactly happened between them. The maid explained that perhaps there was a reason for this memory loss, since the mistress had changed a lot after the accident. She suggested that if the Duke knew that she had become so kind because of amnesia, it might affect his feelings. If he realizes that his feelings for her are not needed, he may close himself off, not wanting to feel pain. The maid added that when her memories returned, he would not have to worry about seeing her emotionless. The lady asked again, thinking that she had always thought that he hated her. The maid advised the lady to think about it, because if this were so, the Duke would not have spent huge amounts of money on their wedding. The lady was amazed and asked again what exactly this huge amount of money was. She couldn't believe it. The maid confirmed that the master was indeed ready to propose to her in order to restore the well-being of her family. The lady realized that all this was true and understood his intentions. The maid promised to contact the Marchioness to find out details about the situation with the Duchess and then pass them on to the master. The lady suggested that perhaps it would be better for her to deal with the matter personally. The maid objected that the Duke would immediately notice if she suddenly began to take an interest in foreigners and insist on punishing the Duchess. It will look strange if she starts interfering so actively in these matters. The lady began to think that perhaps she had some personal negative experience with foreigners, and this was influencing her behavior. The maid reassured her, assuring her that the Duchess would not go unpunished, since she had insulted the only heir. The lady thanked Margot for her help and asked her to convey information about the fate of the Countess and her family. The maid bowed and wished her mistress a good night's rest. At night, the lady sat in silence, lost in thought, and looked at the floor. She thought about the fact that she had instructed the maid to find out what would happen to the Countess and her family. The husband, who at first glance avoided her but deep down cared for her, was in her thoughts. Sheriel had always been treated with love and care by her family, but she herself could not understand why she was so rude and cold to them. This left her in thought. She would have loved to ask the real Sheriel what caused this behavior. She was at a loss and could not find an answer. She couldn't understand why she was doing this. It was all so strange and incomprehensible to her that it left her with no peace. A week passed, and Sheriel noticed that the temperature around her began to rise, and it became noticeably hotter. This feeling grew stronger with each passing day. The maid advised the mistress to drink ice water to cope with the heat and not to overheat. This was important advice in such a hot time. Margot also brought good news, so she decided to tell the lady what she had learned. The news was quite important and unexpected. Sheriel was surprised and asked the maid what exactly she wanted to tell her. It promised to be something significant, and she was ready to listen. The maid reminded her that the mistress had previously asked for news of what would happen to the devil she had inquired about. This made Sheriel think. It soon became clear that she was no longer a countess, and her family would no longer be able to attend important meetings. Everything was changing, and this worried Sheriel. The lady was shocked. She could not believe that this was true, and asked the maid again to make sure that she had understood correctly what was happening. During the investigation, it became known that the Countess had an affair with a knight of her house. This was completely unexpected and greatly affected her position. The maid quietly whispered this to her mistress, and she was completely shocked by what she heard. Everything that was happening seemed incredible and unexpected to her. Mrs. added that it turned out that Sheriel's son was not the Earl's son at all, and she was thrown out without money or support. Everything was crumbling before her eyes. Sheriel didn't want such a cruel punishment, but apparently it was her karma, from which there was no escape. She faced the consequences of her actions. The lady, unable to bear it, asked where her son was. She thought he was in the library now, as always. It was a moment of expectation when she wanted to be near him. The maid confirmed that her son was indeed in the library and added that the heat was getting stronger. He was unlikely to go outside. Sheriel was eager to see her son and asked Margot to prepare cold desserts for him. It was her little wish that she was looking forward to. Margot approached the lady again and said that she had something else important to convey. This made Sheriel interested. Sheriel turned to the maid in surprise and asked what exactly she was going to talk about. Her curiosity was strong and she expected to hear something important. The maid said that this would be unexpected news that could affect the mistress's future. She hoped that even with the return of her memories, Sheriel would be happy. The maid confidently said that Sheriel would continue to take care of her son as before. She was sure that the mother's love would not change. The maid added that despite the changes, the mistress will remain as golden as she is now. Everything will be as before, despite all the difficulties. She apologized to the lady for any unnecessary trouble she might have caused with her words. It was a sincere apology that she addressed to Sheriel. Sheriel calmly replied that she loved her son and would continue to take care of him no matter what. She wanted him to always be happy. She continued to assure the maid that her son needed to feel loved and important, and that no memories would change her love. Everything would remain as it was now. The maid was glad to hear this. She sincerely thanked her mistress for her confidence and said that she also believed that everything would be fine. The maid admitted that she had not been able to prepare many desserts as planned, but the mistress, despite this, was preparing for the upcoming treats with joy. Sheriel walked into the library and, noticing that her son was not there, immediately called out to him. She knew that he always liked to read there and decided to start looking for him. The library was fairly quiet and the atmosphere was calm. Sheriel decided it was a good place to take a look around and see where Cardisel might be. She headed for the stairs, hoping to find him at the top. Soon she noticed him. He was sitting at the table with a book in his hands, and it seemed that he had already fallen asleep, absorbed in reading. There were plenty of places to rest in the mansion, and although it wasn't his room, it was always cozy. Sheriel walked over to him and, seeing that he was asleep, gently picked him up. He looked so cute and vulnerable when he was sleeping, and his flushed face added to his charm. Sheriel looked at him tenderly, feeling the warmth of his body, but in a moment her calmness gave way to anxiety. She sensed that something was wrong. Cardisel was feverishly hot, and she knew that his condition could worsen at any moment. Sheriel started to panic, but then she noticed that there was a cooling spell hanging in the library that was supposed to lower the temperature. She quickly held him in her arms, trying to calm herself. At that moment, Cardisel groaned weakly, as if he was unable to remain conscious. His weak sound made Sheriel even more worried about his health. Cardisel remembered the words of his friend Radius, who often told him how his mother told him bedtime stories. These memories now brought him some comfort. He had always known that there were many places in the mansion where he could be alone. However, now it seemed to him that his room was not the only place where he could feel comfortable. Cardisel didn't think this was unusual, although he knew that other people had similar hidden places for solitude. He didn't see anything strange in this. Radius, who was always a little envious, often said that his mother loved him much more. But Cardisel always knew that in reality, his mother valued him the most. Cardisel laughed to himself, remembering how Radius tried to convince him that his mother loved him more. However, he knew that in his case, his mother's love was unconditional and did not require proof. Radius once asked him if he was looked after when he was sick. Cardisel recalled how his mother was always there, holding his hand and comforting him in the most difficult moments. When Cardisel felt ill, his mother was always there, never leaving his side. She held his hand, comforted him, and supported him, regardless of his condition. These moments remained in Cardisel's memory, and he promised himself that one day he would be able to return everything that his mother had done for him with the same care and love. Cardisel had never been sick before, and he was always proud of it. He believed that it was because he was a good son who did not make his mother worry. He was sure that his health was the result of his good behavior. His mother did not worry, and that meant more to him than anything else. He noticed that it seemed that his mother loved him even more than he thought. After all, he was never sick, and she did not have to worry about him. This added even more confidence to his thoughts. His mom always called him Cardi because he was a good son. He always did what she was told, and maybe that was one of the reasons why she loved him so much. Cardisel felt a lot of pain. His head was splitting and his condition was only getting worse. Sheriel quickly picked him up and began to move quickly towards the room. She carried him to his room, where a doctor was immediately called. Sheriel hoped that it was nothing serious and that his condition would improve soon. The doctor examined Cardisel and reassured them. He said that the headache was related to growth and that it would pass in a couple of days. It was a temporary phenomenon and nothing to worry about. He assured that Cardisel had no serious health problems and that there was no reason to worry. But he still advised not to ignore such symptoms in the future. Sheriel couldn't believe it was because of his height. She had always thought that this kind of pain was something adults had, but now it was clear to her that her son had his own unique characteristics. The healer explained that Cardisel had an innate ability that was linked to fire. When his power reached a certain threshold, he felt pain until he balanced it. When his strength in his body reaches its peak, his body cannot hold it, and it makes him worse. Sheriel felt relieved when she heard the doctor's explanation. First aid was given, and the young gentleman could now rest a little. The doctor said it was important to give him time to recover to avoid further complications. The maid reassured Sheriel, saying that she shouldn't worry so much. She promised to keep an eye on Cardisel's condition and suggested that her mistress rest in her room. Sheriel thanked the maid for her concern and, feeling a little better, apologized for disturbing her. She left Cardisel in the maid's care and went to her room, but she still won't be able to relax if he remains under her supervision. So she will call the maid if she suddenly needs some help. She asked the maid to leave her and her son alone so that they could be alone. When the lady heard her son approaching, she immediately asked him if he was okay, as he was making some strange sounds. The boy replied that it hurt, but at the same time said that everything was fine. The lady calmed him down, assuring him that everything would be fine and that she was with him now. She noticed how he began to cry and call her mom. She was scared when he first called her mom. It was unexpected and unusual for her. She told him that mom was there, and for the first time he called her mom in full. Before he only said, "Ma." The boy woke up and immediately apologized, explaining that he didn't mean to act like a child. He said he wouldn't do it again and asked her not to hate him. The lady embraced him and assured him that she did not understand why she should hate him, calling him her daughter. She added that she was very glad that he called her mom for the first time. It meant a lot to her. She told him that he didn't need to try to act like a child because he was already doing what he wanted. The boy called her mom again and she said yes, assuring him that she wouldn't be afraid if he got hurt. She explained to him that he just needed to rest, as good rest was important for his recovery. And as soon as he feels better, they will be able to go boating, which will bring a lot of joy. The boy agreed and tried to sleep again. But then he asked if she could read him one more story before he fell asleep. Mother replied that he was in pain and hoped that it would not prevent him from falling asleep. The boy said that her voice did not bother him at all and that he was ready to listen. She started reading a story and he immediately began to fall asleep. When she finished, she looked at him and saw that he was already fast asleep. He slept so soundly that it looked really cute. The Duke entered the room and asked why she was still in bed. She was scared when she heard him, because his question scared her, and her heart almost stopped. She explained that he needed to rest, since he had been working all day and was probably very tired. But she also suggested that he might be worried about their son. The gentleman said that the air must be safe and he needed to be sure that the boy was okay. She assured him that he shouldn't worry and that it was just fatigue from working late, that was why she came here. He couldn't believe her words and doubted that everything was really so. The lady replied that she was going to be with her son all night to look after him. However, the Duke immediately suspected that she was up to something, and this made him wary. But the lady assured him that this was not the case at all, and that she was simply caring for her son. The gentleman noted that if she was the one he knew, then her behavior seemed strange. He couldn't believe that she could change, even if at first glance it seemed so. But he was sure that people did not change so easily, and therefore did not rise, not understanding where she got such thoughts from. The gentleman claimed that the whole situation arose because Sheriel hated both him and his son, although the reason was much deeper than he thought. Sheriel replied that perhaps they had once been, but now she loved them. She had a particularly strong attachment to her son, who had become her rock. The gentleman believed that it was precisely because of this love that she reacted so sharply to her son's insult and could not restrain herself when she heard a word that humiliated him. He couldn't understand what exactly was in her soul that caused such anger, not imagining why she would become so angry at the mere mention of his roots and origins. Sheriel noted with a slight smile that the child had nothing to do with it, and her face became a little awkward for a moment, as if she herself felt discomfort. The gentleman nodded, agreeing with her that the child really had nothing to do with what was happening, and continued to watch her reaction, waiting for further words. He asked firmly if she could hold his hand, his tone a little tense and his gaze uncertain, as if he hadn't expected such a question from her. The lady, looking at him in surprise, asked why his hands were shaking, but he did not answer, only looked into her eyes, hiding his feelings. He quietly said that it was strange how she could be so cold and repulsive before, and now she calls him by name and is even ready to hold his hand. There was a hint of irony in his voice as he turned to her, suggesting that she might have lost her memory in the accident, and that would explain her behavior. He added that if she really had lost all those memories that had previously hindered her attitude towards him, then now everything had become clearer. He claimed that it was for this reason that it became so easy and pleasant to be around her, as if everything had changed and become somehow simpler and brighter. Everything was going great until she made one mistake that shattered the illusion that everything between them could be as he imagined. She couldn't believe that Keanu was really that ill, that his condition was so critical. It seemed that her maid Margot was right in her assumptions. The Duke admitted that if this had not happened, he would never have known how much things had changed and how much he had not noticed before. He said that only now did he realize how happy he could be when she didn't hate him, when her feelings for him had changed. He started to leave, but there was a strange feeling in his heart as if he couldn't leave so easily. And that's when she tried to stop him. But he suddenly turned and hugged her, making her feel that moment when their lives crossed again and everything became a little different. Sheriel was shocked by his actions, but he told her that he fell in love with her smile, which was as bright as the sun, and could never forget it. The sound of her whispers, her soft voice, everything about her. He felt as if it had become a part of him, and now he was tied to her forever. When her memories return, they will no longer be as close as before. Everything will change, and they will lose the harmony they had now. Until that moment, he asked her permission to be selfish, although he understood that his request might sound strange, but he could not restrain his desires. The girl quietly asked him to let her go first so that everything could calm down a little, and so that she could sort out her feelings before deciding anything. The Duke simply asked for forgiveness, and she replied that it was okay, that everything was fine, and her reaction was not what he expected. The gentleman thought that she had made her final decision, but she smiled and said that if he really wanted it, she would not interfere with him. She knew that he was a good and caring person, always ready to show his love and kindness. She also realized that all his rudeness was actually hiding the embarrassment he felt inside. He was worried that she would turn away from him when they returned and the memories would come back to life in her mind. He was afraid that her gaze would become cold and the answer she would give would be too painful for him. The gentleman hugged her and she replied that even if her memories returned, she would not forget his warmth and care. The gentleman could not understand where she got such softness and sensuality from. She seemed completely different to him. He was afraid that if she continued to speak so softly, he would not be able to accept it if she suddenly changed. The gentleman noted that it would be difficult for him to cope with her tenderness, because now she was so sweet and caring. The lady simply smiled, enjoying this moment. She was pleased to feel his attention and care. He couldn't understand what was so funny, but she just replied that she didn't know. He was just too nice. It was the same man who hadn't even looked at her at dinner. And now it all seemed such a strange change. The Duke thought that she would simply forget about it and everything would return to its place. He thought she was only joking, but now he realized that she was serious and understood her feelings. He turned to her, waiting a long time for her answer, and noticed how her smile confirmed his thoughts. She admitted that she had been cold and rude to him, but she hoped that he still loved her despite this. She believed that he still loved her despite all the difficulties they faced. The gentleman instantly remembered her face and, smiling, said that of course he loved her, despite all their experiences. He realized he had been foolish and told her that he was still in love, despite all his fears and doubts. He knew he could be colder than snow and rougher than stone, but he didn't care because her smile warmed his heart. Her smile warmed his soul, giving him a sense of peace and confidence despite all the difficulties. The lady was a little embarrassed, not understanding what exactly was so romantic in her words, but she was pleased to feel such closeness. The gentleman approached her, clinging to her hair to smell it. This unexpected gesture made her blush, and she felt very embarrassed. At that moment, she thought that his beauty was so stunning that she could go crazy. His appearance that day was flawless, and she could not take her eyes off him. She admitted to herself that his attractiveness could drive her crazy. He looked so strong today. His presence in the room made her heart beat faster. The girl felt a strange tension because she knew that they shouldn't behave like that in front of their son. Their behavior shouldn't go beyond the bounds of decency. In response to her words, the gentleman smiled, noticing how she stumbled. He easily noticed her awkwardness, and she felt her face become even redder. The gentleman joked that she was obviously embarrassed. She tried to justify herself, but his smile only increased her embarrassment. She wanted this moment to pass as quickly as possible. The lady was alarmed by his words and asked him to step back because she needed some space to calm down. She could not stand being so close. She reminded him that he hadn't come here to talk to her, but to visit their son. Everything that was happening seemed out of place in this situation. The gentleman confirmed that he had indeed come to visit his son, but his desire to see his wife was no less important. He could not ignore her presence. However, he added that he was here not only for his son, but also because he had not seen her for a long time. His desire to see her was strong, and it was far from accidental. The lady was surprised by his behavior, because he was rarely so attentive and kind. Usually he was busy and did not pay attention to her when she came. The gentleman always seemed absorbed in his work when she entered the room. He never looked at her, even when she tried to attract his attention. He asked her if she was really bothered by his behavior, since she had never complained about it before. He expected her reaction to be calmer. He admitted that he was always glad to see her, but he knew that she couldn't stay in the office forever. He was afraid that she would leave and perhaps never return. He expressed his desire to enjoy her beauty while he had the opportunity. She asked him not to look at her as if he had all the love in his eyes. She thought he must be scared because his words sounded so serious. His eyes were full of fear that she couldn't ignore. The gentleman continued to look at her with such anxiety that she felt how much he was afraid of losing her. He could not hide his emotions and regrets. He thought that when she started looking at him with disdain again, he wouldn't be able to bear it. He wanted to be close to her, even if it was dangerous for his heart. The gentleman smiled, assuring her that he would always love her. He always felt this love, despite everything that was happening around him. His words were sincere. The lady blushed again and asked him why he was saying such words, and why the romance had arisen in the room where their son was. It was all too unexpected. She couldn't express all her emotions in words. Her indignation was too strong, and she felt herself blushing more and more. She was easily embarrassed. She needed to collect her thoughts, calm down, and figure out what to do next. First, she needed to somehow kick her husband out to restore peace. She said that was enough for today. She needed to take care of her son. But her husband suggested that they take care of this issue together, not alone. The gentleman replied that he had too much to do to devote time to this, since all his duties required attention, and therefore he had no time for such questions. However, he noted that he could ask Ada to help him with his affairs. He was sure that she would cope and help him free himself to pay attention to his family. She, of course, really hoped that the boy would wake up now and help her. At that moment, it seemed to her that she lacked strength, and her mother's heart could stop. Suddenly, she heard the boy quietly tormenting himself in his sleep, as if something was bothering him and he was experiencing discomfort. She realized that the time had come and she needed to act. She approached his bed and gently asked if he was okay. Only then did she realize that he clearly needed some rest and that she needed to be there. The boy replied that he felt dizzy and that he felt something was wrong. His face was pale, and she immediately realized that the illness was getting worse. He also complained of a high temperature. The lady examined him, noticing that his body was still hot and she needed to be patient to make him feel better. She hurried to put a compress on his forehead, hoping it would bring relief. She believed that with his condition, he would soon feel a little better. The boy said he felt a little better, but found the noise in the room too disturbing. He asked for some silence so he could focus on how he was feeling. He pointed at his father and said that his loud talking was making his head hurt even more. He wanted everything around him to be quieter so that he could bear the pain more easily. The boy said he would feel more comfortable staying with his mother and that he didn't need his father around. He wanted to be cared for and reassured by those he trusted. The lady lowered her head, realizing that these words could not help but hurt her husband. It was hard to hear that the boy had chosen her instead of him, but she understood that it was temporary. She apologized to her husband, saying that it was better for her and her son to be alone. It was difficult, but she felt that the boy needed her support and peace. The husband said that he also understood how to ease the pain, because at his age he had experienced something similar. He was sure that he knew what to do to help his son. If he stays a saint, things should get better. But the boy screamed, saying it was too loud, and began hugging his mother, trying to find comfort in her embrace. He couldn't understand why his behavior was so strange, why he continued to behave like this despite all the commotion and sounds around him. Cardi complained that her father was too loud and that her ears were ringing so loudly that she thought her head was going to explode from the noise. The gentleman was surprised by the behavior of his heir, not expecting that he would show such indecent impudence and behave so restlessly. Sheriel suggested that he go and rest, assuring him that she could handle her son herself and would be able to comfort him by dealing with his anxiety. He tried to object, but the lady asked him to be quieter, explaining that her son needed some peace to calm down and feel better. The Duke was upset, but realized that he would have to leave them and go away so as not to create unnecessary disturbance and not to disturb the mother and son. He told her not to worry too much and wished her good night, hoping that everything would work out and the situation would improve soon. The next day, the lady could not concentrate on work as her thoughts kept returning to the events of the previous night, and she could not understand what was happening. The maid noticed that the mistress looked tired and suggested that she take a little nap to restore her strength, but she refused, deciding to continue working. Sheriel replied that she could not afford to rest because she had to finish her work or she would not have time to fulfill all her obligations. The maid noticed that sitting all night with the young master was also her duty, and the mistress decided to ask her opinion about her son's condition. The lady confirmed that she had to eventually retire to her office to concentrate on work as the day had proved too busy for her. At this moment, the young master regained his strength and ate his dinner with great appetite, which testified to his gradual recovery. Sheriel noticed that her son was getting stronger, and it was gratifying to see him recovering despite his fatigue and weakness. She couldn't imagine what she would do if he didn't even want to eat, as that would be another big worry for her. The maid assured her that there was no need to worry because they were doing everything they could to help and trying their best to make sure everything was okay. Suddenly, someone knocked on the door, and the maid suggested checking who it was, as they were not expecting any visits at that moment. The lady was amazed when she saw her husband come to her. He was the first one to visit her, and her heart beat a little from surprise. It all happened because of the events of the previous night. The maid reported that a young master had come to the mistress, and this added new questions and worries to their home. The lady was surprised when she saw him. It was unexpected for her because she did not expect him to appear at that moment. His appearance was a real surprise for her. She noticed that he had not yet fully recovered. He did not get up from his seat, as his condition still did not allow him to make many movements. However, she was glad that he did not have a temperature, and hoped that he would not have difficulty walking. He said that he felt much better. Everything was fine, and the pains no longer bothered him. He said that he felt much better, and this made her happy because his recovery was improving. He admitted that he simply missed them. The mistress and her maid were delighted by his words. It made them smile and feel happy because his return was long awaited. Her son had become very sensitive lately, which the maid also noticed. She said that she had completely forgotten that tea and cake were to be prepared. This funny misunderstanding made everyone laugh. The boy approached his mother and said he was wondering if she was busy right now. He showed interest in her activities, wanting to spend time with her, without understanding how she would work or what exactly she was doing. He asked if he could stay right there and then. With his eyes full of hope, he waited for permission to stay in the room and be with her while she did her business. It was just Milana who wanted to record it on video. She wanted to capture this moment to keep it in her memory, as she knew this day was special for everyone. The lady said that her job was not the most interesting, and he should understand that. She explained that her duties required attention, but she still tried to find time to communicate with him, although work remained the most important thing. The boy replied that it didn't matter to him at all. He was ready to wait if necessary, to be near his mother. He wasn't worried, he knew that everything could be done later. He said that while she worked, he would just sit next to her. He did not demand attention, but wanted to be there, sitting quietly and watching her work, feeling the calm of her presence. The lady said he could wait a little. She promised that she would try to finish her work quickly. Once she had finished, they could spend time together, and she would read him a story. At this point, it started to rain, and her thoughts wandered a bit. She noticed the sounds of the rain, which was starting just when she was planning to finish her chores and spend time with her son. The rains had become more frequent lately, and this could mean that the rainy season would soon begin. That time of year was approaching, and she was already looking forward to cozy moments inside the house when the rain would be outside. She was a little surprised because she wanted to go boating with her son. However, the rain had ruined their plans, and now they had to move them to an earlier time, which upset her a little. The boy said that he didn't mind, but his dad wouldn't go. He noticed that his father didn't show any interest in such walks, and this seemed strange to him because his father was always busy and avoided such events. After that, the gentleman came up and said that he had a strange feeling that something was happening behind his back. He felt that something had changed. And at that moment, tension arose. The lady was frightened and did not understand what exactly was happening. She could not figure out what had happened and why the gentleman had said that. Questions arose in her head that she could not immediately explain. He explained that the door was open and he decided to look into the room on his way to the office. He did notice that his son was nearby and expressed his opinion on what was happening. His main focus was still on his wife. He said he was ready to go with them anytime she wasn't busy. He was ready to support her, to be there if she allowed it, and it gave him a sense of calm and confidence in his feelings. The boy was a little angry because he did not want to go with his father. He felt that the plan did not suit him, and his displeasure showed in the way he reacted to the proposal. He told his mother that he wanted to sit next to her when they were riding in the carriage. He expected that his wish would be heard, and he would be able to be next to her at that moment, to feel her support. Of course, she agreed. The gentleman said that he himself would sit next to her because, despite everything, they were not husband and wife, as is customary in the family, but just people. However, the boy began to say that his father was busy and his mother often preferred to be near him, and therefore he would be there, as always. The gentleman noted that he needs to spend more time with his wife because she is first and foremost his wife, not the mother of his son, and this is a priority. She couldn't understand that this was actually a childish squabble between a father and son, who were ultimately dividing her up in an attempt to get attention. She would very much like for a friendship to be established between them, for everything to be without unnecessary words, but it seemed that it would be useless to count on this. She remembered it and even felt a small spark of light appear inside, almost like a memory of something important. Standing up, she declared that arguing was bad, and they would get nowhere if they continued in the same spirit. Something had to be decided. She suggested that they both step outside for a while. Time, she thought, would help cool their hot heads and find a way to understand. The husband was scared. The guy didn't understand what was going on either. Their relationship seemed so confusing and hard to understand. She insisted that they be quiet and not ask unnecessary questions. She also added that Kian should stop acting like a child in front of his son. The husband tried to justify himself, but she interrupted him, asking him to be quieter. She did not want to listen to his excuses anymore at this point. She stated that he was the father and could not understand how he could behave like that towards his own child. It was unacceptable. She also addressed the boy, saying that one should not speak so rudely to his father. One must respect parents, even if they also make mistakes. She stressed that if Dad wants to spend time with him, he shouldn't avoid him. The boy should understand that mutual respect is important. The boy realized his mistake and, feeling guilty, asked his mother for forgiveness, promising not to do it again and hoping that she would not leave him. He said he wouldn't do it again and asked for forgiveness, asking his mother not to leave him. He was afraid of losing her because of this fight. Mother replied that she never intended to leave him. However, when she and Dad quarreled, it was important that they were punished a little for such behavior. The gentleman and his son did not understand what punishment she was talking about. They both could not imagine how they could fix the situation in this way. The mother explained that they would walk together, holding hands to show that they were a family and could solve all problems with love and support. It was still cold outside, so they decided to walk through the corridors of the mansion. The gentleman said that in this case there are certain limits to what is permissible. Mother noticed that she and Dad were really very close, and this was true despite all the difficulties they were going through at that moment. The lady said that they had to leave her room and not return until they had made her decision. They had to give her time to think. She asked the maid Margot to escort the guests out so that they could think about their actions and decisions. Let them wait a little. Both were upset, and the gentleman decided to take his son in his arms, comforting him despite all the problems that had arisen between them. He noted that, unfortunately, they have no other choice. They must hold on tightly to each other because this is the only way to overcome all difficulties. The boy said that he agreed with the proposal, but clarified that it was his mother's request, and only then did he agree. He asked the maid to watch what was happening carefully and then be sure to tell everything to his mother as soon as possible. The maid promised to fulfill the boy's request and to be attentive, promising the mistress that everything would be done. They squeezed each other's hands tightly. Everyone present was shocked when they saw the Duke and the young master together. They had never seen them together before, and it was a surprise. Some have already begun to suspect that the lady and the young master have become much closer to each other recently than before. The Duke was taken aback when he noticed that the maid was not taking her eyes off him. The boy felt that all this was connected with him. The Duke could not understand why the boy was blaming him. He believed that if he had not been capricious, nothing would have happened and everything would have been different. The boy noted that if he had given up his seat next to his mother, then the punishment would probably have been avoided and everything could have ended peacefully. The father gave no answer, and the boy began to think that he should have said at least something, but nothing followed. It wasn't surprising to expect jealousy from such a young child, especially considering that his wife was clearly angry with him. So the Duke admitted his guilt and said that he was indeed wrong in this situation, although it upset him greatly. The boy was shocked by his father's apology. The gentleman remarked that he did not understand why the boy suddenly fell silent without saying another word. The boy said that he shouldn't forget that his mother still loved him more. It was obvious to him, despite the apologies. The gentleman replied that even if this was so, he should not forget that they were still husband and wife and should support each other. The Duke said that the boy still had much to understand. The world around him was far from being as simple as he imagined it. The maid noticed that it seemed that the mistress's plan to get closer to her husband was beginning to bear fruit. They became closer to each other. When they returned, the maid felt uneasy. She noticed that her mistress looked too tired, as if something was wrong. The maid was worried because the mistress was clearly overtired. She looked so tired that she could not stand on her feet at all. When they came closer, they saw that the lady was not just leaning on the table, but rather was sleeping, completely oblivious to their presence. The Duke said that it would probably be better to carry the lady to her bedroom so that she could rest in comfortable conditions and regain her strength. The maid suggested calling the butler for help so that he could help carry the lady and not let her experience unnecessary inconvenience. However, the gentleman decided that he did not need to ask for help. He would take responsibility for carrying the lady himself so that everything would be done quickly. He noted that his wife was surprisingly light, which came as a surprise to him as he had expected more tension. The maid noticed that the mistress had lost weight and was now really having a hard time. She was concerned about this, believing that she needed to watch her diet. The Duke said he did not wish the lady to become ill again, but he was not against the idea of them taking care of her health and dinner. The maid noticed that the mistress was worried about him and was constantly wondering if he was eating properly. The gentleman was surprised and asked if his wife was really so worried about him. The maid replied that she had often told her mistress that it must be very lonely for the Duke to eat alone, and also that the lady so much wants to have dinner with him. But because of this incident, she is afraid to ask. The maid also added that she said it by accident. because the mistress asked her not to talk about it. The Duke said there was nothing to worry about and he would pretend he hadn't heard anything. The main thing here is something else. Did his wife say the same thing? The maid remarked that, of course, she would not lie to the Duke's face. She thought that he would go to the mistress's bedroom, and at that time, she would spend a lot of time with the master in his room. The boy, because he needs to see him off, and also because he wants to go with his father. Mom was with him all night, now it's his turn to watch her. The Duke said that most likely the boy would not listen to him anyway, even if he told him to go to his room. The boy said that he knew him well, and he smiled. She is even more beautiful sleeping. The boy sat next to her and said that Mom was always beautiful, and also that she is very kind to the servants. The Duke smiled and said that she never gets angry at those who are kind to her. The boy noticed that she knew what kind of sweets he liked, and he added that when she reads fairy tales, her voice sounds like that of an angel. The Duke said that there was no other way to put it. Her smile was truly angelic. The lady already really wanted these compliments to end when she heard all this and blushed. She was glad that they had become closer, but now she was ready to die of shame. She didn't know what to do. Continue lying there and pretending to be asleep or open her eyes. Still, she decided to pretend to be asleep. But suddenly she felt silence and thought that they had left. At least she heard their steps. Finally, she decided to open her eyes and saw both her husband and the boy in front of her. One asked how she was feeling. The lady did not understand when they managed to come here. She fell asleep and did not even notice how they returned. The boy said that she would not deceive them. The lady noted that they had just argued, and she accepts it. Before we even had time to become friends, the Duke, who asked me if this was what she wanted. The boy said it was her own fault. They were getting along now. The lady said that praising someone while he was sleeping was very embarrassing, but the boy didn't understand how he could restrain himself when he had such a good mother. She changed her and noticed that she was probably tired, so she needed to rest. And she also said that he would like to sleep with her daughter. Mother said that, of course, no problem. And he could move closer to her personally, as it would be more comfortable. Well, he was glad, because now it was time to go back to his room, madam. What did she say that he could not keep Dad at a distance? The boy said that it's not that he doesn't like his dad. It's just that he loves his mom much more, and wants to hear that she loves him more than anyone else. She just said that he didn't even know about it. The boy was choking, saying something, just silently looking at it. The Duke asked if everything would be okay if he stayed too. The boy said that since his mother wants them to get along, he allows it. The father lay down with them. The boy didn't want it to be so close. Over time, the boy fell asleep so quickly that he was so cute. The Duke noted that lying in plasticine when you find out that she loves him is like a dream come true. He's wanted this for so long that she can't even imagine it. Sometimes it even seems to him that everything that is happening is a painfully difficult punishment. The lady does not rise. Why this concern when next to them is a sweet little girl? She said that when the weather in the glass is golden, the three of them will sail on a boat. After this, the Duke hugged his son and wife even tighter, and they fell asleep. She did, that this time she kept her promise. The Duke's assistant noticed that today the Duke was unusually cheerful. The gentleman said that if there is time for chatting, then he will also have time for paperwork. The guy said that time was still ticking. That's why she didn't understand where the gentleman was rushing to. I told him that if he doesn't work, he can find time for something else. The guy put it down, trying to understand what the gentleman was talking about the expedition. But they only went there recently. The land should be in order for some time. But perhaps he and his wife would like to go somewhere. Someone knocked on the door and it was the lady. She asked if he was busy because she wanted to discuss something with him. The boy noticed that his dad seemed busy, so he suggested coming back later. But the Duke stopped them, seemed to be trying to settle everything, and said that they could pass. The lady asked if he remembered her promise, and the Duke confirmed it. She would like to go boating while it is not too hot. The Duke said he could not spare a day until next week. There is no need to worry about the location, because he has already arranged everything. The lady was glad that he had also prepared and noted that he was trying very hard. After that, she smiled, thanked him, and said that she was looking forward to it, and added that the food should also be prepared. The assistant said that a holiday alone with his family should bring the Duke happiness, because sleepless nights had left him very tired. A couple of days later, the maid reported that the weather was very good. The lady hoped that they had not forgotten anything. The maid said that she put all the food she asked for in this basket. The lady was grateful, but it was a little hard for her. The boy turned to his mother, and she told him not to run like that because he might fall. The boy replied that he wanted to be near her, and the lady smiled, saying that he was very cute. She hoped that he would sit in the carriage next to his father. But the boy said that he wanted to be next to her. As he gets older, he can't hide his emotions at all, and it's very cute. Meanwhile, the Duke approached, and she thought that he had been waiting for her for too long. He noticed that her dress suited her very well. The lady thought it was really beautiful and noticed that such dresses were popular now. He said she needed to take care to protect her skin or she might get sunburned. He added that he would do this later while they were getting into the carriage. The lady was surprised. He spoke with such a red face that she did not know what to think. The boy said that they needed to get to the carriage faster because he was hot. The lady realized that he was still too small, and the Duke said that he had cast a cooling spell on him so that he would not be hot during the journey. He picked him up and noticed that she had blushed too, and she said that she had better tie herself into the carriage. The lady was about to go crazy. She wants him to stop smiling like that, because he is already handsome, and with a smile he becomes even more handsome. The boy asked if they would definitely find her here at his father's, since there was only grass around. The Duke said they would have to get off and walk a bit. Luckily, the weather was fine. The coachman announced that they had already arrived, and the Duke said that he would go out first. He told the lady to go down more carefully and offered her his hand. The boy also took his hand and thanked him. The lady said that he was simply jealous, of course. She said this in a whisper. The Duke took him in his arms and said that he knew about it himself. The boy screamed for his father to let him go because he wanted to walk hand in hand with his mother. His father said he would carry him to the lake, and if he got tired before they got there, he wouldn't be able to enjoy the boat ride. The lady said it was very good to have such a strong dad. The coachman wished them a good ride and promised to return at sunset. I think he took the basket and said they could go now. The lady also asked how far they had to go. He is so close now that my heart is literally bursting out of my chest. The Duke said that they are far away and he can carry her. She said that it was not necessary because she was not baby and she was heavy, so it would be difficult for him. The gentleman said that if she was worried about him, then there was no need to think that way. He could cope. The boy told his father to go faster. The lady suggested that they walk more often like this. It was very pleasant even just to watch them. The boy was smiling. He noted that Dad would call, so it wouldn't happen again. Dad said that they had already arrived. The boy asked his mother to look in that direction. The woman was surprised. Such a view, she didn't know that there, in that place, we have such a place. The Duke then said that he had always wanted to come here with her. And now, at last, she had kept her promise. Shariel wasn't quite sure what promise he was talking about, so she decided to ask again to clarify the situation. The Duke, in turn, admitted that he himself did not expect that she would have a child. It was an unexpected turn of events. He added that the child was probably the result of his promise to her immediately after the wedding. And that's exactly what happened. Shariel admitted that she really liked it. The fact that he kept his word seemed especially important to her, and a very sweet gesture on his part. The Duke, smiling, replied that he was ready to do everything necessary for her, so that she would be content and happy, without doubting her decision.